I stopped by my daughter's place without warning. She was asleep on the floor by the door in old ripped clothes. Her husband wiped his muddy shoes on her back and told the guests, "She is our crazy servant." I didn't yell. I stepped forward. What I did next changed the course of history for my family. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a bully who underestimated who you really are. My name is Luther Banks. I am 70 years old, and to the outside world I look like a man who has lost everything. I drive a beat-up truck. I wear stained gardening clothes. I live in a small wooden house that has seen better days. But appearances are the greatest lie we tell. What my son-in-law, Bradley Worthington, does not know is that I sold my logistics empire 5 years ago for $80 million. He thinks I am a broke old man surviving on Social Security checks. He thinks he is the king of the castle because he lives in the mansion I secretly paid for. But tonight, the king was about to see his kingdom built on sand. I walked up the long driveway of the estate in the hills. The gravel crunched under my worn-out work boots. I could hear the music thumping from inside. It was a cocktail party. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Porsches, Teslas. The kind of cars driven by people who think net worth is a personality trait. I reached the front steps and a private security guard stepped in my path. He looked me up and down with a sneer. "Deliveries are in the back, old man," the guard said, crossing his arms. "I am not a delivery man," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am here to see my daughter Zoe and her husband." The guard laughed. "You mean Mr. Worthington? He is entertaining investors. He does not have time for charity cases." "Step aside, son." I did not raise my voice, but I let a little bit of the old CEO authority slip out. The guard hesitated just for a second. That was all I needed. I pushed past him and walked up to the massive glass double doors. Through the glass, I saw a scene that made my blood turn to ice. The foyer was filled with people in tuxedos and evening gowns holding champagne flutes. In the center of them was Bradley holding court. But it was not Bradley that stopped my heart. It was what was at his feet. Curled up on the expensive Persian rug right by the door was my Zoe. She was not wearing the beautiful dresses she used to love. She was wearing a gray rag that looked like a potato sack. It was torn at the shoulder. Her hair was matted. She was curled in a fetal position, staring at the floor, completely motionless. I pounded on the glass. The sound cut through the music. Heads turned. Bradley looked toward the door. His annoyance was visible from 20 feet away. He said something to his guests that made them laugh, and then he walked over. He unlocked the door, but he did not open it wide enough for me to enter. He blocked the way with his body. "Well, if it isn't," Luther Bradley said loudly enough for everyone to hear. He took a sip of his bourbon. "Did you run out of money for heating again? I told you not to come here when I have company. It embarrasses the brand." "Move, Bradley," I said, trying to look past him. "What is wrong with Zoe? Why is she on the floor?" Bradley let out a sigh of mock exhaustion. He turned back to his guests who were watching with amused curiosity. "Everyone, this is my father-in-law. He was a gardener his whole life. A bit simple in the head, if you know what I mean." He pointed at me with his glass. "And sadly, the apple does not fall far from the tree." Bradley took a step back. He looked down at his Italian leather loafers. They were caked with fresh mud from the garden. He looked at the pristine floor, and then he looked at my daughter. "Oh dear," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I seem to have tracked mud in. We cannot have that, can we?" Then he did it. He lifted his foot and placed it squarely on my daughter's back, on the white fabric of her torn shirt, and he wiped. He dragged the sole of his shoe across her spine, grinding the mud into the cloth. I froze. The air left my lungs. Zoe did not scream. She did not jump up. She did not fight. She simply shuddered. A small, involuntary tremble like a kicked dog that knows better than to bite back. "Clean it up," Bradley said, snapping his fingers. Zoe slowly uncurled. Her movements were stiff and mechanical. She pulled a rag from her pocket and began to wipe the mud from his shoe while he was still wearing it. Then she started scrubbing the floor. She never looked up. She never spoke. The guests laughed. A few of them clapped lightly. "She is our crazy servant," Bradley announced, beaming at the crowd. "We took her in out of pity, really. She thinks she is a maid from the Victorian era. The doctors say it is best to play along. If we stop her from cleaning, she gets violent. Violent. My Zoe, the girl who used to cry if she accidentally stepped on a snail. I slammed my shoulder into the door, trying to force my way in. "That is enough, Bradley," I roared. "Get your hands off her." Bradley was stronger than he looked, or maybe I was just holding back because I knew if I touched him, I would kill him, and I could not save Zoe from a prison cell. He shoved the door shut against my shoulder, pinning me there. "Do not make a scene, Luther," he hissed, his voice dropping the charming facade. "You are ruining the vibe. Zoe is working. She is happy. Look at her." I looked down. Zoe was scrubbing the floor with a frantic intensity. Her eyes were wide and empty. She looked right at me through the glass, and there was zero recognition. Nothing. It was like looking into a house where the lights were on but nobody was home. "She does not know you," Bradley said, smirking. "She barely knows her own name these days. The medication is heavy, but it keeps her docile. Now get out of here." He signaled to the security guard. "If you want a handout, go to the back door," he said, raising his voice again for the benefit of his audience. "The cook might have some leftovers for you, but do not dirty up my front porch again." He slammed the door in my face. The lock clicked. I stood there trembling with a rage so hot it felt like it was burning my skin. Inside the glass, I saw him turn back to his guests. He shrugged as if to say, "What can you do with the help?" The security guard grabbed my arm. "You heard the man. Get moving." I shook him off. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was the voice of the man who used to make union leaders sweat across a negotiation table. The guard stepped back instinctively. I walked away from the front door, but I did not leave. I walked around the side of the house through the shadows of the manicured hedges. I needed to see her. I needed to know what they had done to my little girl. And I needed to know why my brilliant, vibrant daughter was acting like a broken animal. I found the kitchen entrance. The blinds were open. I peered inside. What I saw broke my heart into a million pieces and then fused it back together with pure steel. Zoe was in the kitchen now. She wasn't eating at the table. She was huddled in the corner by the trash can. She was holding a plate that looked like it had been scraped off from the party guests. Half-eaten shrimp tails, crusts of bread. She was eating it with her hands fast and desperate, like she hadn't seen food in days. I tapped on the glass. "Zoe." "Baby girl." "It is Daddy." She jumped. She dropped the food. She scrambled backward until her back hit the cabinets. Her eyes darted around the room in terror. "No talking," she whispered to herself, rocking back and forth. "No talking. Master gets mad. I am crazy. I am crazy. I am crazy." She repeated it like a mantra, like a prayer for survival. The door from the hallway swung open and Bradley walked in. He wasn't alone. He had a man with him, a tall, older white man in an expensive suit. I recognized the look. An investor. Bradley ignored me at the window. He probably thought I was gone. He gestured to Zoe, who was now cowering on the floor. "See," Bradley said, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. "It is a tragedy, really. My wife passed away years ago. This is her sister. We adopted her from the asylum. It is a tax write-off, of course, but mostly it is just my good heart. I give her a roof. She does the chores. It is the only life she can handle." The investor looked at Zoe with disgust. "Is it safe to have her around?" Bradley laughed. "Oh, she is harmless as long as she takes her meds. Besides, I have power of attorney. If she acts up, I can send her back to the ward with a phone call." He walked over to Zoe and nudged her with his foot. "Get up," he said. "Stop eating garbage. You are embarrassing me." Zoe scrambled up and ran to the sink, starting to wash dishes with that same frantic mechanical energy. I backed away from the window into the darkness of the garden. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of war. He had erased her identity. He had erased her marriage. He was telling people he was a widower and she was a charity case. And he had power of attorney. He thought he was dealing with a senile old gardener who could be bullied with a few insults and a security guard. He had no idea he had just declared war on Luther Banks. I pulled my old flip phone from my pocket. It looked like a piece of junk, but it was encrypted. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 6 months. "Jerome," I said when the line clicked open. "I am here, sir," Jerome replied instantly. His voice was crisp, professional. "I need you to pull a file," I said, watching Bradley laugh in the kitchen window. I need the medical records for Zoe Worthington and Jerome. Yes, sir. Jerome. Find out why my daughter thinks she is insane, and find out exactly how much debt Bradley Worthington is in. I want to buy it. All of it. I hung up the phone. I looked at the mansion one last time. Enjoy your party, Bradley, I whispered, because tomorrow the bill comes due. I crept toward the back entrance of the estate, my boots making no sound on the pavement. The kitchen windows were glowing with warm light, but what I saw inside froze the blood in my veins. Through the glass, I saw my daughter Zoe kneeling on the cold tile floor next to an overflowing garbage can. She wasn't throwing things away. She was digging. Her hands, the same hands that used to play the piano with such grace, were frantically sorting through discarded napkins and half-eaten appetizers. She pulled out a piece of bruschetta that someone had taken one bite of and shoveled it into her mouth. She swallowed it whole without chewing, her eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal, terrified that someone would take it away. I pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. The air inside smelled of expensive seafood and stale trash. Zoe froze. She didn't look up. Her shoulders hunched up toward her ears in a defensive posture that told me everything I needed to know about her life in this house. Zoe, I whispered, my voice cracking. It is Daddy. I am here, baby girl. I took a step toward her, reaching out my hand. She scrambled backward on her hands and knees, slipping on the tile until she hit the refrigerator. She curled into a ball, covering her head with her arms. No, 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 please do not hit me, she whimpered. Her voice was high and thin, like a child's. I was not stealing. I was just cleaning. I am cleaning the garbage. See? Cleaning. She grabbed a dirty napkin from the floor and started scrubbing the air with it, her eyes wide and unseeing. I knelt down in front of her. The knees of my gardening trousers hit the floor hard, but I didn't feel it. I reached out and gently took her wrists, stopping her frantic movements. Her skin was ice cold. There were bruises on her forearms, old yellow ones and fresh purple ones shaped like fingers. Look at me, Zoe, I said, trying to keep the rage out of my voice so I wouldn't scare her. It is me. Luther, your father. She looked up then. Her eyes met mine, but there was no recognition. Her pupils were blown wide, dilated so much that her brown eyes looked black. They were glassy and unfocused, swimming in a chemical haze. Master says no talking, she recited, her voice flat and monotone. Crazy girls do not talk to strangers. Crazy girls eat the trash. That is the rule. She pulled her hands from my grip and went back to picking at the floor, finding a crumb of cracker and popping it into her mouth. My heart shattered. I had built an empire. I had negotiated deals worth millions. I had faced down union strikes and corporate raiders. But seeing my child like this, broken and starving in her own home, made me feel helpless for the first time in 40 years. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her against my chest. She was so thin. I could feel every rib through the thin fabric of her rag. She stiffened, but she didn't fight me. She just trembled, vibrating with terror. The door from the hallway swung open. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses spilled into the kitchen for a second before the door clicked shut again. Bradley stood there. He was holding an empty crystal decanter, probably coming for a refill. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than most people earn in a month. He stopped when he saw me on the floor holding his wife. He didn't look angry. He didn't look ashamed. He looked bored. Well, isn't this a touching family reunion, he drawled, walking past us to the liquor cabinet. He poured himself a drink with steady hands, not spilling a drop. I see you found the help. I slowly stood up, helping Zoe to her feet. She immediately tried to drop back down to her knees, but I held her up. What have you done to her, Bradley? I asked. My voice was low, a rumble of thunder before the storm. She does not even know who I am. She is eating out of the garbage. Bradley took a long sip of his drink and sighed, a performance of a long, suffering saint. He leaned against the counter, looking at Zoe with a mixture of pity and disgust. It has been hard on all of us, Luther, he said, shaking his head. You do not know the half of it. After the miscarriage, she just snapped. I frowned. Miscarriage? Zoe never told me she was pregnant. We lost the baby boy about 2 years ago, Bradley continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She blamed herself. She started hearing voices. The doctors say it is a complete psychotic break. He walked over to Zoe and patted her head like she was a dog. She flinched away from his touch. She thinks she is a servant, he said. It is part of her delusion. She refuses to eat at the table. She says she only deserves the scraps. If I try to force her to eat normal food, she throws it up. So I let her do this. It keeps her calm. That is a lie, I said. My daughter is strong. She does not just snap. And why is she bruised? Why is she terrified of you? She hurts herself, Bradley said smoothly. She throws herself down the stairs. She bangs her head against the walls. I have to restrain her for her own safety. I have to chain her up at night, Luther, or she would run out into the street and bite people. You have no idea the burden I carry keeping her here instead of tossing her in a state facility. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a prescription bottle. He rattled it in front of my face. Risperdal, he said. High dosage. It is the only thing that stops the screaming. Do you know how much this costs? $500 a bottle. And insurance does not cover it because of the pre-existing condition. He looked at me expecting me to be impressed by his generosity. I looked at the bottle. I knew what Risperdal was. It was a heavy antipsychotic, used on people with severe schizophrenia. But in the wrong hands, it was a chemical lobotomy. It caused confusion, lethargy, and memory loss. He wasn't treating her. He was erasing her. He was drugging my daughter to keep her compliant. He was turning her into a zombie so he could play the grieving husband while treating her like a slave. Why isn't she in a hospital, I asked. If she is this sick, she needs doctors. She needs care, not a leash and a mat on the floor. Bradley laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. A hospital. You think I haven't tried? Private facilities cost thousands a day, and I am tapped out, Luther. This house, the company, the treatments, it all adds up. I am doing the best I can with what I have. He took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive scotch and rot. Unless, of course, you want to chip in, he said, a sneer curling his lip. You got any money buried in that garden of yours, old man? He looked me up and down, taking in my muddy boots and my worn jacket. I didn't think so, he scoffed. I stared at him. I wanted to reach out and crush his windpipe. I wanted to tell him that I could buy this hospital he spoke of and fire the board of directors just for sport. I wanted to tell him that I had $80 million sitting in accounts that he couldn't even dream of accessing. But not yet. If I revealed my hand now, he would know I was a threat. He would hide her. He would move her. Or worse, he would kill her and make it look like one of her accidents. How much, I asked. Bradley blinked, surprised. How much for what he asked? To put her in a real facility, a place where she gets treated like a human being. Bradley's eyes narrowed. He looked at me, calculating. He saw a desperate father, a broke old man grasping at straws. He saw an opportunity. $50,000, he said, right now. Cash. He smiled, showing his teeth. If you can hand me 50 grand tonight, I will drive her to St. Jude's myself and get her the VIP suite. But if you don't have it, then you do not get to tell me how to handle my wife. He knew I didn't have it, or he thought I didn't. He was mocking me. And until you cough up the cash, she works off her debt, he said, turning away from me. She breaks dishes, she ruins clothes, she costs me money every day she is alive. So she cleans. It is only fair. He drained his glass and slammed it onto the counter. Now get out, he barked. I have investors to charm, and you are smelling up my kitchen. He pointed to the back door. Go on, before I call the cops and tell them a vagrant broke in. I looked at Zoe one last time. She had gone back to the trash can, humming a tuneless song to herself, rocking back and forth. She didn't look at me. She was lost in the fog he had put her in. I promise you, I whispered so only I could hear. I am coming back for you. I turned and walked out the door. The night air hit my face, but it didn't cool the fire burning in my chest. My eyes were stinging, not with tears, but with a dry, hot rage. $50,000. He wanted $50,000 to treat my daughter like a human. I walked to my truck, parked down the road in the shadows. I climbed in and slammed the door. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed me. I started the engine. The old truck roared to life. You want $50,000, Bradley? I said to the empty cab. I will give you something worth a lot more than that. I'm going to give you a lesson. I pulled out my phone and dialed Jerome again. We have a change of plans, I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. I am not just buying his debt, Jerome. I am going to destroy his world. But first, I need to know the truth about that baby. I drove away into the night, leaving the mansion behind. But I wasn't running away. I was just getting a running start. I sat in the cab of my rusted Ford pickup truck parked just down the road from the estate where the lights of the party were still blazing. The steering wheel was cold under my hands, but my blood was boiling hot. I had played the part of the helpless old gardener for too long. It was time to shed the skin. I reached under the passenger seat and pulled out a heavy black case. Inside was a satellite phone and a military-grade laptop. These were tools from my past life, tools I had sworn I would never need again. I powered up the system. The blue light of the screen illuminated the scars on my hands, scars from years of building a logistics empire from the dirt up. I dialed Jerome. He answered on the first ring. "I am secure, Sir," Jerome said. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need you to break into the St. Jude Hospital mainframe," I said, my voice rough like gravel. "I need the medical records for Zoe Worthington. I need everything, Jerome. Every scan, every prescription, every doctor note from the last 3 years. And do it now." "Consider it done," Jerome replied. I kept the line open while he worked. While I waited, I opened a separate program on the laptop. 2 years ago, when Bradley first bought this mansion with the money I secretly funneled to him through a shell company, I had installed a security system. Not for him. For Zoe. I told him it was a housewarming gift, a basic alarm system. What I didn't tell him was that I had embedded a high-definition camera and microphone inside the decorative birdhouse that hung on the old oak tree facing the front porch. I hadn't checked it in months. I had wanted to give them privacy. I had wanted to believe they were happy. God forgive me for my negligence. I accessed the archive footage. I scrolled back. I needed to see the timeline. Bradley said Zoe lost the baby 2 years ago. He said that was when she snapped. I typed in the dates. The video feed loaded. It was grainy at night, but the audio was crystal clear. I watched a clip from 24 months ago. It was raining. I saw Bradley's car screech into the driveway. He got out stumbling, drunk. Zoe came out to the porch. She looked healthy then, beautiful. She was wearing a yellow dress. I turned up the volume. "Where have you been?" she asked him. Her voice was strong, defiant, not the broken whisper I heard tonight. Bradley didn't answer. He stormed up the steps. "You spent it all, didn't you?" she shouted. "My father's money. You gambled it away." "Shut up!" Bradley roared. He struck her. It wasn't a slap. It was a closed fist punch to the side of her head. Zoe fell. She hit the porch railing hard. Then he kicked her. He kicked her right in the stomach. I watched the screen, my own stomach turning to lead. I saw my daughter curl into a ball. I saw him kick her again and again, screaming that she was useless, that she was a burden. Then the footage stopped. The file was corrupted, or maybe the storm had knocked out the signal. But I had seen enough. Jerome's voice cut through the silence of the truck cabin. "Sir, I am in. Tell me," I said. "Tell me about the miscarriage." There is a long pause on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that usually precedes a death notification. Sir Jerome said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "There was no miscarriage." "What do you mean?" I asked, gripping the phone. "He said they lost a baby boy." "Zoe was never pregnant," Sir Jerome said. "The medical records are conclusive. She has not been pregnant in the last 5 years. But, sir, there is something else. Read it," I commanded, closing my eyes. "The file is dated October 14th, 2 years ago." Jerome read. "Patient admitted via emergency room. Severe blunt force trauma to the abdomen. Fractured ribs 4 and 5. Mild traumatic brain injury. Ruptured spleen." I opened my eyes. October 14th. The same night as the video, the report says the cause of injury was a fall down a flight of stairs. Jerome continued. But the attending physician noted that the bruising patterns were inconsistent with a fall. They were consistent with repeated strikes from a blunt object or a foot. "He beat her," I whispered. "He beat her until she broke." Sir Jerome said, "The damage to her reproductive organs was catastrophic. The trauma caused massive internal scarring. The doctors noted secondary infertility. She cannot have children, Luther. Not anymore." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Bradley didn't just lie about the miscarriage, he invented it. He beat her so badly that she could never be a mother, and then he convinced her that she had lost a baby that never existed. He used the trauma of the beating, the brain injury from the concussion to rewrite her reality. He told her she killed their son. He told her she was crazy with grief. He drugged her with antipsychotics to keep her confused, to keep her from remembering that he was the one who destroyed her body. "It is gaslighting on a level I have never seen," Jerome said softly. "He created a tragedy to cover up a crime, and he is using the medication to ensure she never figures it out. The Risperdal causes memory fragmentation. If she takes it daily, she will never be able to piece the timeline together. She believes she is a murderer, Luther. That is why she accepts the abuse. She thinks she deserves it. I looked at the mansion. It looked like a castle, but it was a torture chamber. He took her mind, I said. He took her future, and he made her thank him for it. There is more, Sir Jerome said. I dug into the company he is pitching tonight. Worthington Tech. Let me guess, I said. It is a shell. It is worse than a shell, Jerome said. It is a ghost. There is no product. There is no patent. There is no staff. It is just a bank account in the Caymans and a very expensive website. He is soliciting $5 million in seed funding tonight. I looked at the live feed from the birdhouse camera. I could see guests mingling on the porch. I could see Bradley holding a glass laughing with a group of men. I tapped into the audio feed from the porch. I needed to hear how he was selling this lie. The audio crackled to life. Revolutionary algorithm, Bradley was saying. We are going to disrupt the entire logistics market. I listened. He was using buzzwords he didn't understand. But the men around him were nodding. They were older white men with the look of old money, the kind of men who belonged to country clubs that didn't allow people who looked like me until the 90s. But Bradley, one of the men asked, his voice slurred with drink. What about the home front? We hear rumors. You know, a man needs a stable house to run a stable company. Bradley laughed. It was that same cruel laugh I heard in the kitchen. Gentlemen, my house is under control. I am a bachelor, essentially. My wife passed some time ago. Tragedy. He paused for effect. The men murmured their sympathies. And the girl, the man asked. The one in the rags. Oh, her, Bradley said dismissively. That is just my charity work. I found her in a state ward. Mentally deficiency, no family. I took her and trained her to clean. It is good for the image, you know. Shows we have a heart. Plus, she is free labor. The men laughed. A dark, ugly sound. You know how it is? Bradley continued, lowering his voice. It is hard to find good help these days, especially the ones who know their place. She is a bit dark for the neighborhood, if you know what I mean, but she stays in the back. She knows she is lucky I don't put her out on the street. I gripped the laptop so hard the screen warped. He wasn't just hiding her. He was erasing her. He was telling these investors he was a widower. He was denying his marriage because he knew these men. He knew they wouldn't invest in a man married to a black woman. So he turned his wife into a servant, a mentally ill charity case, a pet. He was stripping her of her humanity to sell a fake company to racists. Jerome. I said, my voice surprisingly calm. The calm of a man looking down the barrel of a sniper rifle. Yes, sir. Did you find the debt? I did. Bradley owes $2 million to a private lending consortium in Las Vegas, the kind that breaks legs first and sues later. He is 3 months behind on payments. They have given him until Monday to pay or they liquidate his assets. Monday, I said. That is 3 days. Yes, sir. He is desperate. That is why he is hosting this party. He needs the investor money to pay off the sharks. If he doesn't get the funding, he is a dead man walking. I looked at the screen. Bradley was clinking glasses with the investors. He looked confident. He looked like a winner. He had no idea the sharks were circling, and the biggest shark of all was sitting in a rusted truck at the end of his driveway. Jerome, I said. Buy the debt. Sir, you heard me. Contact the consortium. Offer them 100 cents on the dollar plus a 20% premium for immediate transfer of the note. I want to own every dime he owes. I want to be the one holding the leash. It will cost $2.4 million, Sir Jerome said. Pocket change, I said. Do it. And Jerome, yes, sir. Get the helicopter ready and call Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Jerome asked, his voice showing a rare hint of surprise. The tech billionaire. The very same. He owes me a favor from the trucking strike of '98. Tell him I have an investment opportunity he cannot refuse. Tell him I want him to attend a dinner party tomorrow night at the Worthington estate. I understand, sir. And Jerome, yes, get me a suit. Not the cheap ones I wear to church. Get me the bespoke Tom Ford, the navy blue one, and bring the Rolls-Royce around to the back road. The gardener is retiring tonight. Tomorrow the chairman returns. I closed the laptop. The screen went black. I sat in the darkness watching the house. You want to play master and servant, Bradley? I whispered. Fine, let us play. But you forgot one thing. The servant cleans the house, but the master owns it, and by tomorrow night I am going to own you. I started the truck and pulled away slowly. I didn't look back. I had work to do. I had a daughter to save, and I had a son-in-law to bury not in the earth but in a mountain of debt and shame so deep he would never see the sun again. The investigation was over. The execution was about to begin. The next morning I walked back up the long driveway to the Worthington estate. I wasn't wearing my suit yet. I was back in my stained gardening trousers and a jacket that had holes in the elbows. In my hand I clutched a thick manila envelope. It was heavy. Inside was $5,000 in cash. It wasn't crisp, clean bank stacks. It was a mess of fives, tens, and singles crumpled and worn, smelling of old wallets and desperation. I had withdrawn it specifically to look like money that had been hidden under a mattress for 20 years. It was a prop, a ticket to get me through the front door one last time. I didn't go to the back door today. I went straight to the main entrance. The security guard stepped out of his booth, his hand resting on his belt, but the front door swung open before he could stop me. Bradley was standing there. He must have been watching the security feed. He didn't look at my face. His eyes were locked on the envelope in my hand. Greed has a specific look. It makes the pupils dilate. It makes a man like Bradley forget that he is supposed to be sophisticated. "You brought it," he said, not bothering with a hello. "It is all I have," I said, my voice trembling with a feigned weakness. "I sold my truck. I emptied my savings. It is $5,000. Please let me see her. Let me take her to the hospital." Bradley snatched the envelope from my hand. He weighed it in his palm, his lip curling in disappointment. $5,000, he scoffed. "I asked for 50, Luther. 5,000 won't even cover the intake fee at St. Jude. But I guess it is better than nothing. Come in. Do not touch anything." He turned and walked into the house, leaving the door open. He knew I would follow. I stepped over the threshold, wiping my boots on the mat, excessively playing the part of the obedient servant. The house smelled of lavender and money, but underneath that expensive perfume was the rot of the people who lived there. I followed him into the formal living room. It was a massive space with vaulted ceilings and furniture that looked too uncomfortable to sit on. But two people were making themselves very comfortable. Sitting on the white silk sofa were an older couple. They looked like older versions of Bradley. The man was reading a newspaper, ignoring the world. The woman, Mrs. Worthington, had her legs propped up on a velvet ottoman. She was drinking a mimosa. And there on the floor, kneeling on the expensive rug, was Zoe. She was still wearing the rags from the night before. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She held a pair of silver nail clippers in her hand. She was bent over Mrs. Worthington's bare foot, carefully clipping the woman's toenails. My breath caught in my throat. This was not just servitude. This was humiliation. This was dehumanization designed to break a spirit. Mother Bradley said, tossing the envelope onto the coffee table. The gardener brought some pocket change. Mrs. Worthington didn't look at me. She didn't look at the money. She stared down her nose at my daughter. "Careful, you clumsy girl," she snapped. "You are too rough." Zoe flinched. "I am sorry, mistress," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "I will do better." She leaned in closer, her hands shaking. I could see the tremors from across the room. It was the medication. It messed with her motor control. She tried to clip the nail on the big toe, but her hand slipped. The clippers pinched the skin. A tiny drop of blood appeared on the woman's toe. Mrs. Worthington shrieked. She pulled her leg back and then kicked out. Her foot struck Zoe square in the face. The impact made a sickening thud. Zoe fell backward onto the rug, holding her cheek. "You stupid animal," Mrs. Worthington screamed, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly hatred. "Look what you did. You made me bleed." She looked at the tiny scratch on her toe like it was a mortal wound. Then she looked at Zoe with eyes full of a racism so deep and ancient it felt like the room temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Dirty black thing," she hissed. "You people are all the same. Useless. You cannot even cut a nail without resorting to violence. You did that on purpose, didn't you?" "No," Mistress Zoe cried, cowering on the floor. I slipped. "Please, clean it up," Mrs. Worthington commanded, pointing at her foot. Zoe reached for a tissue from the table. "No," Mrs. Worthington said, her voice cold as ice. "Not with a tissue. Use your tongue, lick it clean. That is all you are good for." I felt the blood in my veins turn into molten lead. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I squeezed so hard that my fingernails dug into my palms, piercing the skin. I felt the warm trickle of my own blood, but the pain kept me grounded. It kept me from leaping across the room and snapping that woman's neck. If I moved now, I would lose everything. I had to watch. I had to witness the depth of their depravity so I could bury them with it later. Zoe hesitated. She looked at Bradley. He was pouring himself another drink, watching the scene with mild amusement. He didn't say a word to stop it. He took a sip of scotch and nodded at Zoe, giving her permission to degrade herself. Zoe slowly lowered her head. She was weeping silent tears that tracked through the dirt on her face. She leaned forward toward the woman's foot. "Good girl," Mrs. Worthington sneered. "Know your place." Just as Zoe got close, Bradley laughed. "Okay, that is enough, Mother," he said. "We do not want her diseases." Mrs. Worthington pulled her foot away, looking disappointed. "You are too soft on her, Bradley," she muttered. "That is why she is so undisciplined. If this were my house, she would be sleeping in the barn." I stood there frozen, a statue of a broken old man. Inside, I was screaming. I was memorizing every face, every word, every second of this torture. Bradley turned to me. He picked up the envelope again and ripped it open. He pulled out the wad of bills. He looked at the crumpled currency with disgust, like he was holding used tissues. "Is this a joke?" he asked. He fanned out the bills. Ones, fives, a few 20s. "There is barely $5,000 here," he said. "I told you, 50, old man. Can you not count? Or is math too hard for you people?" He threw the money into the air. The bills fluttered down around us, landing on the floor, landing on Zoe, who was still curled up crying. It looked like a perverse rain. I sold everything, I said, my voice raspy. "My truck, my tools. That is all there is. Please, Bradley. Just take her to the doctor. Look at her. She is hurt." Bradley stepped over the money. He walked up to me until he was inches from my face. "You are pathetic," he spat. "You come into my house, you insult my mother with your presence, and you offer me this garbage. $5,000 does not even cover the champagne tab from last night." He grabbed my jacket lapel and shoved me backward. I stumbled, but I didn't fall. I let him push me. I needed him to feel powerful. "You want more money?" he said. "Go sell a kidney, sell your house. I don't care, but do not come back here with pocket change and expect favors." He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a crisp $1 bill. He crumpled it up and threw it at my chest. It hit me and fell to the floor, joining the rest of the scattered cash. "There," he said. "Bus fare. Get out of my sight. And take your trash with you." He gestured to the money on the floor, not to Zoe. He didn't mean take my daughter. He meant take the $5,000 because it was too little to be worth his time to pick up. I knelt down. I didn't pick up the money. I crawled toward the sofa where Mrs. Worthington was wiping her foot with a silk handkerchief. "What are you doing?" she shrieked. "Get away from me." "I am sorry, ma'am," I mumbled, keeping my head down. "Just getting the bill. It rolled under here." I reached under the sofa. My hand brushed the wood frame. In my palm, hidden between my fingers, was a small black disc. A high-powered listening device with a battery life of 48 hours. I pressed it against the wood. The adhesive stuck instantly. I pulled my hand back, clutching the $1 bill Bradley had thrown at me. "I got it," I said, standing up. I looked at Zoe one last time. She was staring at the scattered money on the floor, her eyes vacant. She didn't look at me. She was gone. "Hold on, Zoe," I thought, projecting the words into her mind. "Daddy is leaving, but I am leaving my ears behind." I turned to Bradley. He was smirking victorious. "Thank you for your hospitality," I said. The words tasted like bile. "Get out," he said, turning his back on me. I walked to the door. I stepped out into the sunlight, but the world felt dark. I heard the lock click behind me. I walked down the driveway, the $1 bill still clenched in my fist. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could already hear them through the earpiece in my pocket. The show was just beginning. I sat in the darkness of my truck cab, parked securely down the service road, hidden by the dense line of oak trees. The engine was off, but the hum of my surveillance equipment filled the small space. I adjusted the headphones over my ears, pressing them tight against my skull until the world outside disappeared. All that existed now was the audio feed coming from the small black disc I had planted under the sofa in Bradley's living room. The sound was crystal clear. It was as if I was sitting right there on the rug next to them. I could hear the clinking of porcelain teacups. I could hear the rustle of fabric. And I could hear the voice of the woman who had just kicked my daughter in the face. "Why do you not just kill her, Bradley?" Mrs. Worthington's voice came through the feed, sharp and impatient. I am serious, son. She is a blight on this house. Every time I see her shuffling around in those rags, it makes my skin crawl. It is embarrassing. What if the neighbors see? What if the club members see? I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turned white. A mother suggesting the murder of her daughter-in-law as casually as if she were discussing removing a stain from a carpet. I cannot just kill her mother. Bradley's voice was slurred slightly from the scotch, but the cruelty was sober and precise. Think about it. If she dies here in the house, there is an investigation. There are autopsies. The police ask questions. I cannot have cops sniffing around my business right now. Not with the IPO launch. Not with the debt. Then, what is the plan? Mr. Worthington spoke up for the first time. His voice was deep and bored. We cannot keep feeding her. It is a waste of resources. The plan is the asylum, Bradley said. I need to get her committed. Officially. I need a judge to sign a paper saying she is a danger to herself and others. Once she is in the system, she disappears. She becomes a file number. And people die in those state facilities all the time, Mother. They hang themselves with bed sheets. They choke on their food. They have adverse reactions to medication. He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. And when she dies in state custody, nobody asks the grieving husband any hard questions. They just send a sympathy card and a life insurance check. It is clean. It is efficient. I just need a little more time to break her completely. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This was not just abuse. This was a premeditated execution strategy. He was going to drive my daughter insane, get her locked away, and then pay someone to silence her forever. The conversation lulled. I heard footsteps leaving the room. I am going to freshen up, Mrs. Worthington announced. Do not let that creature touch my things while I am gone. The door clicked shut. For a moment there was silence in the living room. Then I heard the buzzing of a phone vibrating against a hard surface. Bradley picked it up. Yeah, he answered. His tone changed instantly. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a thin, reedy fear. Look, Tony, I told you. The money is coming. I have investors lined up. I just need a few more days. I turned up the volume on my receiver. I needed to hear the other side of this call, but the technology only picked up the room audio. I could only hear Bradley. But I didn't need to hear the other side to know what was happening. Bradley was sweating. I could hear his heavy breathing. No, please do not do that, Bradley stammered. Listen to me. The crypto market crashed okay. I lost the leverage, but I have a backup. My wife. He paused, listening. Not her life insurance, you idiot. That is peanuts. I am talking about the trust. I froze. The trust. My father-in-law, that old gardener. Bradley continued, his voice lowering to a whisper. He acts poor, but I found some papers in his house a few years ago. He set up a blind trust for Zoe when she turned 25. It is sitting in a holding account in the Caymans. $5 million, Tony. 5 million liquid. I closed my eyes. He knew. He had rifled through my private files years ago, probably when I let him use my home office to print resumes. He had seen the paperwork for the bank's family trust. He knew Zoe was an heiress. But here is the kicker, Bradley said, a desperate excitement creeping into his voice. The trust has a clause. If Zoe dies, the money goes to charity. The old man was smart. He didn't want me to get it. But there is another clause. If Zoe is declared mentally incapacitated, her legal guardian gets control of the assets to manage her care. He laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. I am the guardian, Tony. Once I get that court order declaring her insane, I get the keys to the kingdom. $5 million. I can pay you the $2 million I owe plus the juice, and I still walk away with $3 million profit. Just give me a week. I just need to find a doctor who will sign the papers. So, that was it. It wasn't just hatred. It wasn't just racism. It was a heist. He had destroyed my daughter's mind and body to get access to a bank account. He had turned her into a slave to force a psychotic break so he could steal the money I had set aside for her future. He didn't owe a few thousand on credit cards. He owed $2 million to loan sharks. He had gambled away his life, and he was using my daughter as his poker chip. Okay, Bradley said. Monday. I promise. Monday, you get your money. He hung up the phone. I heard him exhale a long, shaky breath. Then I heard the sound of glass clinking against glass as he poured himself another drink. Monday. That was 3 days away. He was running out of time, which meant he was going to get desperate. And desperate men are dangerous men. Suddenly, a loud noise cut through the audio feed. It sounded like a cannon shot. Boom, boom, boom. Someone was pounding on the front door of the mansion. It wasn't a polite knock. It was violence against wood. Bradley dropped his glass. I heard it shatter on the floor. Who is that? He whispered. I didn't need to guess. The loan sharks hadn't waited for Monday. They were sending a message. I watched the video feed from the birdhouse camera. 2 massive men in dark suits were standing on the porch. They didn't look like investors. They looked like slabs of granite in cheap polyester. One of them kicked the door again. Open up, Worthington! A deep voice boomed. We know you are in there. Inside the house, I heard Bradley scrambling. No, no, not now. He whimpered. He ran. I could hear his footsteps thudding on the hardwood, but he didn't run to the back door. He ran toward the kitchen. Zoe! He screamed. Zoe, get in here! My heart hammered against my ribs. What was he doing? A few seconds later, I heard him dragging her back into the living room. No, master. Please, I am cleaning. Zoe was crying. Shut up! Bradley hissed. Stand there. Stand in front of the door. He was using her. He was using my broken, terrified daughter as a human shield. The front door splintered. The lock gave way with a sickening crunch. The 2 men stormed into the foyer. I could hear their heavy boots on the marble. Bradley, the deep voice growled. Tony sends his regards. Bradley shrieked. It was a high, cowardly sound. He shoved Zoe forward. Take her, he screamed. Take my wife. She is worth money. She has a life insurance policy. $1 million. Take her and leave me alone. I stopped breathing. The sheer depravity of it. He was offering her to them like a piece of meat. He was telling them to kill her to cash out a policy. Zoe screamed. It was a sound of pure primal terror, a sound that ripped through my headphones and tore a hole in my soul. No, please, no, she begged. I will be good. I will clean. Do not hurt me. The goons didn't want her. They pushed her aside. I heard the sound of a body hitting the wall. Zoe fell silent except for a soft whimpering. We do not want the girl, Bradley, the thug said. We want the cash. And since you do not have it, we are going to take a down payment out of your face. I heard the impact. It was the wet crunch of cartilage breaking. Bradley screamed again, but this time it was in pain. That is for making us wait, the thug said. Another hit. A thud. The sound of a body hitting the floor. Please, Bradley gurgled. He sounded like his nose was smashed. Please, I have the money coming. Monday. Monday is the deadline, the thug said. Today is just a reminder. If you do not have $2 million by noon on Monday, we come back. And next time we do not use fists. We use tools. And we start with the girl. He paused. She looks fragile, Bradley. Would be a shame if she had an accident before you got that insurance payout. Footsteps retreated. The front door was left hanging open. I watched on the camera as the 2 men walked calmly back to their black SUV and drove away. Inside the house, silence fell. Then the sound of Bradley spitting blood. You stupid, useless thing, he groaned. I heard him kick something. Zoe yelped. Look what you made them do. He blamed her. He had offered her up to be murdered, and now he was blaming her for his broken nose. Get me ice, he ordered, his voice thick with blood, and clean up this glass. If I find 1 shard, you are sleeping outside. Yes, master, Zoe whispered. I took the headphones off. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold them. I placed them gently on the seat beside me. I looked at the mansion looming in the dark. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a crime scene. It was a prison. I started the truck. I didn't turn on the headlights. I rolled slowly out of the trees onto the main road. He had 3 days. The sharks gave him 3 days. But I wasn't going to give him 3 days. I wasn't going to give him 3 hours. I picked up the satellite phone. Jerome. Yes, sir. Call the team. The Alpha team. I want them geared up and ready in 30 minutes. Sir, are we moving on the house? We are, I said. Tonight we take her back. And Jerome. Yes, sir. Bring the zip ties. And bring the sledgehammers. We are not knocking. I drove into the night, my mind cold and sharp. Bradley thought he was playing a game of finance. He thought he was playing poker with loan sharks. He didn't realize he was playing chess with a grandmaster. And he had just sacrificed his queen. Checkmate was coming. And it was going to be violent. The audio feed from the living room turned into a nightmare. After the loan sharks left, the silence didn't last long. I heard Bradley groaning on the floor, nursing his broken nose. I heard him spit blood onto the expensive hardwood. Then the sound changed. It wasn't pain anymore. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated fury looking for a target. Get over here, he snarled. His voice was thick with blood and mucus. I heard Zoe whimper. She was terrified. I could hear her scrambling backward on the floor trying to get away from him. You let them in, Bradley screamed. You opened the door. You let those animals into my house. You embarrassed me, Zoe. You cost me respect. It wasn't true. The sharks had kicked the door down. But facts didn't matter to a man like Bradley. He needed someone to blame, and my daughter was the only punching bag left in the room. I heard the distinct sound of a leather belt being whipped through belt loops. The slide. The snap. Please, Master Zoe cried. I am sorry. I will clean it up. I will clean up the blood. You are going to learn a lesson, he hissed. Then came the crack. Leather hitting flesh. Zoe screamed. It was a high, thin sound that tore through my headphones and pierced my heart. Crack. Another hit. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I reacted. I grabbed the satellite phone. Jerome, execute Alpha. I roared into the receiver. Go. Go now. Break the door down. I slammed the truck into gear and tore out of the tree line. I didn't care about stealth anymore. I didn't care about strategy. My baby was being whipped like a dog, and I was going to tear that house down brick by brick to get to her. By the time I skidded into the driveway, the black van that had been trailing me was already there. Ideally, my security team was supposed to look like electricians or utility workers to avoid suspicion, but tonight they moved like a SWAT team. 4 men in dark blue coveralls rushed the front steps. They carried sledgehammers and crowbars. I jumped out of my truck, my knees protesting, but my adrenaline masking the pain. I ran toward the house. The front door, which had been damaged by the loan sharks, gave way easily under the first blow from my team. The wood splintered and the door crashed inward. Secure the target, I shouted, running in behind them. Get Bradley off her. We burst into the foyer. The scene was chaotic. Bradley was standing over Zoe, his face a mask of blood and sweat, the belt raised high for another strike. When he saw 4 large men burst into his home, his eyes went wide with cowardice. He dropped the belt. He backed away, putting his hands up. Do not kill me, he shrieked, his voice cracking. Take the TV. Take whatever you want. My men moved in. 2 of them went for Bradley, slamming him against the wall. The other 2 moved toward Zoe to shield her, to help her up. Target secured, one of the men shouted, reaching out to help my daughter. It is okay, miss. You are safe. And then the most heartbreaking thing of my life happened. Zoe didn't take his hand. She didn't run to me. She didn't cry with relief. She screamed in fury. She launched herself off the floor, not at Bradley, but at the man trying to save her. She clawed at his face. She bit his arm. She was a wild animal protecting its master. No, she screamed. Leave him alone. Do not touch him. She threw herself in front of Bradley, shielding his body with her own. She spread her arms wide, her tattered clothes hanging off her frame, bruises forming on her arms where the belt had hit her. It is my fault, she sobbed, hysterical tears running down her face. I was bad. I let the bad men in. Master has to punish me. It is the rule. I broke the rule. Zoe. Baby. It is me, I shouted, stepping forward. It is Daddy. We are here to help you. She looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a terrifying mix of fear and confusion. Go away, she screamed at me. You are making him mad. He will send me away. He will send me to the bad place. She turned to Bradley, grabbing his bloody hand and kissing it, frantic and desperate. I am sorry, Master. Tell them to go. I will take the punishment. I will take double. Just tell them to go. My team hesitated. They were trained to fight aggressors, not victims. They didn't know how to handle a woman who was fighting to stay with her abuser. It was Stockholm Syndrome in its most potent and tragic form. He had broken her mind so thoroughly that she believed his violence was love and our rescue was an attack. Bradley, seeing her reaction, began to smirk through his bloody nose. He realized she was his best weapon. You heard her, he said, his confidence returning. She wants you to leave. She is protecting her husband. Get out of my house before I sue you all for home invasion. Grab her, I ordered my men. I don't care if she fights. We are taking her out of here. My men moved forward again, trying to gently separate her from him, but she clung to his leg, screaming like she was being murdered. I deserve it, she wailed. I am the crazy servant. I have to be punished. Just as my men were about to physically lift her, the room was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. Sirens wailed outside, cutting through the chaos. Police, drop your weapons! 3 uniformed officers burst through the open door, guns drawn. They weren't the city police. They were the county sheriff department. And leading them was Sheriff Miller, A man with a pot belly, a red face, and a reputation for looking the other way when the donation check was big enough. I knew Miller. He and Bradley played golf. They drank at the country club. He was on the payroll. "Freeze," he shouted, pointing his service weapon directly at my chest. "Hands in the air, old man," he barked. My security team stopped. They were professionals. They weren't going to get into a shootout with law enforcement. They slowly raised their hands. "Sheriff, thank God," Bradley yelled from behind Zoe. "These thugs broke in. They attacked me. They were trying to kidnap my wife." He put a hand on Zoe's shoulder, possessive and claiming. "Tell him, honey. Tell him they attacked us." Zoe nodded frantically, her eyes wide with terror. "They broke the door," she stammered, pointing at us. "They wanted to hurt Master. I mean my husband. They are bad men." Sheriff Miller looked at me with a sneer. He didn't see a father trying to save his daughter. He saw an old black man in gardening clothes surrounded by muscle standing in a rich white man's foyer. Luther Banks Miller said, spitting my name like a curse word. I should have known. "I warned you about harassing decent folks. He is hurting her, Sheriff," I said, keeping my hands visible but my voice steady. "Look at her. Look at the bruises. He was whipping her with a belt." "I am disciplining my wife," Bradley interjected smoothly. "She was having an episode. She gets violent. I had to restrain her. It is a domestic matter. And these men broke down my door." Miller looked at Zoe. He saw the bruises. He saw the belt on the floor. But he didn't care. He looked back at Bradley and nodded. "Looks like a home invasion to me," Miller said. He stepped closer to me, the barrel of his gun inches from my face. "You are trespassing, Luther. Aggravated burglary. Assault. I could put you away for 20 years tonight." He cocked the hammer of his gun. The sound was loud in the silent room. "Now, get your thugs and get out of here, or I start shooting. And if a stray bullet hits your daughter, well, that would be a tragedy, wouldn't it?" The threat was clear. He wasn't just threatening me. He was holding Zoe hostage. If a firefight started, she would be the first casualty, and he would blame it on me. I looked at Zoe. She was still clinging to Bradley, weeping softly. She was terrified of me. She was terrified of the police. The only person she felt safe with was the monster who beat her because he was the devil she knew. I couldn't save her tonight. Not like this. If I forced it, she would get hurt, or I would get arrested, and then I could never help her. I slowly lowered my hands. "Stand down," I said to my team. Sir Jerome started a warning in his voice. "Stand down," I repeated. "We are leaving." Bradley laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. "That is right, old man. Run away. Go back to your shack." He pulled Zoe closer. "And do not worry about Zoe. I will make sure she learns her lesson tonight. She has a lot of cleaning to do." Miller stepped aside, gesturing to the door with his gun. "Move it, Luther, before I change my mind." I turned around. Every step toward the door felt like a betrayal. I was leaving my baby girl in hell. I could hear her sobbing behind me. I could feel Bradley's triumph burning into my back. I walked out of the house, past the smirk of the sheriff, past the broken door. I climbed into my truck. My team loaded into the van. We drove away in silence. The shame was heavy in the air. We had failed. But as I drove, the cold rage settled back into my bones. Harder this time. Permanent. He had the law on his side. He had the girl brainwashed. He thought he was untouchable. I picked up the phone. "Jerome." "Yes, sir. Find the doctor," I said. "The one who prescribed the meds. The one who faked the records. Find out where he lives. Find out what he loves." "And Jerome." "Yes, sir. We are not using money this time. We are using leverage. I want that doctor's life in my hands by sunrise, because if I cannot break into the house, I am going to burn it down from the inside out. I am coming for you, Bradley," I whispered to the dark road. "You have the sheriff, but I have the truth. And tomorrow I am going to buy the rest of your soul." I drove to the edge of the city where the streetlights flickered and the pavement was cracked. This wasn't the sparkling medical district where Dr. Eric supposedly practiced medicine. This was the dark underbelly where licenses went to die. The sign above the door said "Urgent Care," but the windows were blacked out with cheap tint and the air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. I parked the truck in the alley. Jerome stepped out of the shadows like a wraith. He was wearing his tactical gear, but he had thrown a trench coat over it to blend in. "We are clear," Sir Jerome said. "He is inside alone. My intel says he has been in there for 12 hours. He is using his own supply." I nodded. I didn't feel fear. I felt the cold, mechanical precision of a demolition expert. This man had poisoned my daughter. He had written the prescription that turned her mind into slush. Tonight he was going to answer for it. We walked to the back door. It was locked. Jerome didn't bother picking it. He placed his gloved hand on the handle and torqued his body. There was a loud snap of metal shearing and the door swung inward. We stepped into a hallway that smelled of rubbing alcohol and rot. We found Dr. Eric in his office. It was a filthy room piled high with files and empty takeout containers. He was slumped in a leather chair that had seen better days. His head was lolled back and a tourniquet was still tied loosely around his arm. His eyes were half open, glazed, and wandering. He looked less like a doctor and more like a junkie who had found the keys to the pharmacy. I kicked the metal trash can next to his desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. "Wake up, doctor!" I barked. Eric jumped. He scrambled upright, knocking a tray of instruments to the floor. His eyes darted between me and the giant figure of Jerome blocking the doorway. He looked terrified. He looked like a rat caught in a trap. "Who are you?" He stammered, his voice thick. "You cannot be here. This is a private practice. Get out!" He reached for the landline phone on his desk. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely lift the receiver. "Security!" he yelled. "I am calling security!" Jerome moved. He didn't run. He just covered the distance in 2 long strides. He reached out and grabbed the phone cord, ripping it out of the wall with a casual violence that made Eric scream. Then Jerome grabbed the brass doorknob of the office door. He squeezed. I watched the metal groan and warp under his grip until it snapped off completely. He tossed the broken metal onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud right in front of Eric. "No security," I said, walking forward. "Just us." Eric pressed his back against his chair, trying to merge with the upholstery. "What do you want?" "Money." "I do not have any cash here. Take the drugs. Take whatever you want. Just do not hurt me." I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a thick red file folder. I threw it onto the desk. It slid across the wood and hit him in the chest. "I do not want your drugs, Eric," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I want your soul. Open it." He looked at the folder. He opened it with trembling fingers. His eyes went wide as he scanned the documents inside. "These are copies of your gambling markers from Atlantic City," I explained. $200,000 in debt to the Venetti family, $50,000 to the track, and 3 malpractice lawsuits you settled under the table to keep your license. I leaned over the desk, placing my hands on the wood, leaning into his space until I could smell the fear on him. "You are drowning, doctor. You are broke. You are high. And the people you owe money to are not known for their patience." "How did you get this?" he whispered. "I bought it," I said. "I contacted the Venettis this morning. I paid off your debt. Every cent. You do not owe them anymore." He looked at me with a flicker of hope. "You paid it. Why?" "Because now you owe me," I hissed. "And I am much worse than the mob. The mob just wants money. I want the truth. And if you lie to me, Jerome is going to show you what he does to doorknobs." Eric looked at Jerome. Jerome cracked his knuckles. The sound was wet and heavy. "I own you, Eric," I said. "Your debt, your license, your life. It all belongs to me. Now tell me about Zoe Worthington." Eric flinched at the name. He tried to look away, but I grabbed his chin and forced him to look at me. "Zoe," I repeated. "The woman you have been drugging. Why did you prescribe her Risperdal? Why did you fake her records?" He started to cry. It was a pathetic display. "I had to," he blubbered. "Bradley. He made me. He said he would tell the medical board about my habit. He said he would ruin me." "So you ruined my daughter instead," I roared, slamming my fist on the desk. "You destroyed her mind to save your own skin." "It was just sedatives," he cried. "Just to keep her calm." "Liar," I shouted. "Risperdal does not do what she is doing. She does not know her own name, Eric. She is hallucinating. What else did you give her?" He hesitated. He looked at the door. He looked at the broken knob. He realized there was no way out. "Tell him," Jerome growled, stepping forward. Eric broke. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. "It wasn't just Risperdal," he sobbed. "It was a cocktail, scopolamine, high doses, and an experimental compound Bradley sourced from the dark web. It causes rapid neurodegeneration." I felt the room spin. Neurodegeneration. He was melting her brain. Why, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why would he do that? He wanted her compliant, Eric said, looking up, his face streaked with tears and snot. He wanted to induce a state of permanent dementia. He wanted a doctor to certify that her brain had atrophied so he could get the guardianship. He paid me $10,000 a month to manage the dosage, to make sure she didn't die but didn't wake up either. I felt sick. This was a slow-motion murder, but there is more, Eric said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. He was here yesterday. He said the drugs were taking too long. He said she was still fighting it. And I asked. He picked up a piece of paper from his desk. It was a travel itinerary. He is taking her to Mexico, Eric said. Next Tuesday. There is a clinic in Tijuana, off the books. They do surgeries that are illegal here. What kind of surgeries? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. A lobotomy, Eric whispered. A transorbital lobotomy. They go in through the eye socket. They sever the connections to the frontal lobe. It cures aggression, he said. But it does not cure anything. It turns people into vegetables. It leaves them breathing, but empty. I stared at him. The horror was absolute. Bradley wasn't just going to lock her up. He was going to cut out the part of her brain that made her human. He was going to turn my brilliant, vibrant daughter into a living doll that he could pose and control forever. He wants her to be a vegetable, Eric said. He said if she is a vegetable, she cannot testify. She cannot fight the divorce. She cannot stop him from accessing the trust. He wants to bring her back as an invalid and play the hero who takes care of his brain-damaged wife. Next Tuesday, I said. That is in 4 days. Yes, Eric said. He already booked the flight. Private charter, medical transport, no questions asked. I stood up. I felt cold. Colder than I had ever felt in my life. Write it down, I ordered. What Eric asked. Everything. The drugs, the payments, the Mexico plan. Write it all down in a sworn affidavit. And give me the original medical files. The ones that show she was healthy before you touched her. If I do that, I go to prison, he wailed. If you do not do it, I leave you with Jerome, I said. And when he is done with you, prison will look like a vacation. Eric grabbed a pen. He started writing, his hand shaking so hard the ink splattered. I looked at Jerome. Call the pilot, I said. Tell him to prep the jet. And call my contact at the FBI, not the local field office. Call the director. I want a federal task force on standby. For what Sir Jerome asked. For kidnapping, I said. For conspiracy to commit capital assault. For human trafficking. We are not just taking him down for fraud anymore, Jerome. We are putting him in a hole so deep, not even God will be able to find him. I looked back at Eric, who was scribbling frantically. You write every word, doctor, I said, because that piece of paper is the only life insurance policy you have left. I walked to the window. I looked out at the dark city. Bradley thought he had time. He thought he had until Monday for the loan sharks and Tuesday for the surgery. He was wrong. His timeline just moved up. I am coming for you, Bradley, I whispered, and I am bringing hell with me. I walked out of that filth-ridden clinic with the affidavit in my hand, but I knew a piece of paper would not stop a man like Bradley. He had the sheriff in his pocket. He had the timeline on his side. If I went to the police now, they would drag their feet while he dragged my daughter to Mexico. I needed to cut the head off the snake. I needed to destroy him completely, and I needed to do it in front of an audience. Violence had failed because Bradley controlled the narrative. He was the respectable businessman, and I was the intruder. To win, I had to flip the board. I had to use his greatest weakness against him, his greed. I sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce as Jerome drove us toward the airfield. I picked up the satellite phone again. It was time to make the call I had been saving for 20 years. Arthur Anderson was not just a billionaire. He was a titan of industry, a white man from old money who owned half the shipping lanes in the Atlantic. But back in '98, when his company was on the brink of collapse due to a union strike, I was the one who sat down with him. I was the one who brokered the deal that saved his empire. He told me then that if I ever needed anything, all I had to do was ask. I dialed the private number. It rang twice. Luther, Arthur's voice boomed. It has been too long. To what do I owe the pleasure? I need a favor, Arthur, I said, my voice flat and hard, and I need it tonight. Name it, Luther. You know my word is gold. I need you to become an investor, I said. There is a company called Worthington Tech. It is a fraud. A shell game run by my son-in-law. He is trying to raise $5 million to pay off debts to the mob. You want me to crush him? Arthur asked without hesitation. No, I said. I want you to save him. There was a pause on the line. I do not understand Luther. I want you to call him, I explained. Tell him you heard about his revolutionary algorithm. Tell him you want to invest the full $5 million. He is desperate, Arthur. He will bite. And then Arthur asked, and then you tell him there is a condition, I said. Tell him you are an old-fashioned man. Tell him you do not do business in boardrooms. Tell him you want to sign the contract at his home, tomorrow night. I paused, taking a breath to steady my rage. And Arthur, this is the important part. You have to tell him you have heard rumors about his household. Tell him you admire a man who knows how to keep order. Tell him you want to see how he manages his domestic affairs. Play into his racism, Arthur. Make him think you are just like him. I hear the anger in your voice, old friend, Arthur said quietly. What has he done? He has enslaved my daughter, I whispered. He treats her like an animal, and he thinks it makes him powerful. I want him to show you. I want him to put it all on display, thinking he is impressing you. Consider it done, Luther. Arthur said, his voice turning icy. I will make the call within the hour, and I will be at the estate tomorrow. Thank you, Arthur. Do not thank me yet, Arthur said. Just tell me what to do when I get there. Just watch, I said. And when the moment comes, follow my lead. I hung up. The trap was set. Bradley needed money more than he needed air. He was drowning, and I had just thrown him an anvil painted like a life preserver. I went back to the hotel suite to wait. I monitored the audio feed from the house. It was quiet for an hour. Bradley was pacing, drinking, muttering to himself about the loan sharks. Then his phone rang. It was Arthur. I listened as Bradley's voice transformed from terrified to obsequious. He fawned, he flattered, he practically begged. $5 million, Bradley gasped. Yes, Mr. Anderson, absolutely. The technology is scalable. I listened as Arthur played his part perfectly. He sounded arrogant, demanding, and slightly bigoted. He spun the web and Bradley flew right into it. I like a man who controls his environment, Bradley Arthur said through the speaker. I hear you run a tight ship. No loose ends, no unruly women. Bradley laughed. It was a nervous, eager sound. Absolutely, sir. Discipline is key. My household is very traditional, good Arthur said. I want to see it. Tomorrow night, a gala. Just us. I want to see this famous hospitality. And Bradley, yes, sir. I want the full experience. Do not hide anything. If you have servants, put them to work. I like to see value for my money. I will make it happen, Sir Bradley promised. It will be a night you never forget. He hung up the phone and screamed with joy. We are saved, he yelled. I sat in my hotel room staring at the wall. You are not saved, Bradley, I said to the empty room. You are damned. The next morning I was drinking black coffee when my burner phone rang. It was Bradley. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello, I said, keeping my voice raspy and weak. Luther Bradley barked. Where have you been? Never mind. I do not care. I have a job for you. A job, I asked, playing the confused old man. I have a very important guest coming tonight, Bradley said. A billionaire. He is going to save the company. He is going to save everything. And he likes the old ways, Luther. He likes tradition. That is nice, Bradley, I said. But what does that have to do with me? I need you here, Bradley said. Tonight, 6 p.m. sharp. You want me to come to dinner? I asked. Bradley laughed. A cruel barking sound. Dinner. No, Luther. You are not a guest. You are a prop. A prop. Mr. Anderson likes order, Bradley explained. He likes to see that everyone has a place. I told him about my staff. My loyal, disciplined staff. But you do not have staff, Bradley, I said. You fired the maid last year. I have, Zoe Bradley said. And I have you. He paused, letting that sink in. I want you to put on your work clothes, Luther, the dirty ones, the ones with the holes. And I want you to come stand in the corner of the dining room. You are going to hold a tray. You are going to pour the wine. I stayed silent, gripping the phone. And here is the catch. Bradley continued, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. You are mute. Do you understand? You do not speak. You do not look him in the eye. You are the old mute gardener who serves his betters. Mr. Anderson will love it. It shows power, Luther. It shows that I own the people around me. He wanted to use me as a piece of furniture. He wanted to parade his wife's father around as a conquered slave to impress a man he thought was a fellow racist. And if I refuse, I asked. Then I send Zoe to Mexico early, Bradley said. I have a pilot on standby. If you are not here by 6, I put her on that plane tonight. And by the time you find her, she won't even know her own name. The threat was real. He was leveraging my daughter's brain against my dignity. I will be there, I said, my voice breaking perfectly on cue. Please do not hurt her. I will do whatever you want, good Bradley said. And Luther, wash yourself. I want you looking poor, not smelling poor. I do not want you ruining the appetite of a man worth $5 billion. He hung up. I lowered the phone. My hand was steady. My heart was a cold engine pumping ice water through my veins. He wanted a show. He wanted to demonstrate his power. He wanted to prove that he was the master of his house, the master of his wife, and the master of her father. I stood up and walked to the closet. Inside, hanging in a garment bag, was the suit Jerome had brought me. A navy blue bespoke Tom Ford suit cut to fit me like armor. Next to it was a pair of hand-stitched leather shoes from Italy. I wouldn't be wearing them. Not yet. I reached into the bottom of the closet and pulled out a bag of old clothes I had bought at a thrift store. Stained coveralls, a torn flannel shirt, work boots held together with duct tape. I began to undress. I took off my watch, my gold ring. I put on the costume of the defeated man. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a man who had given up. I looked like the man Bradley thought I was. But eyes do not lie. And in the mirror, my eyes were burning. I am coming, Bradley, I whispered to my reflection. I will be your prop. I will be your mute servant. I will pour your wine, and I will bow my head. I buttoned the torn shirt. But when the curtain falls, I said, straightening my spine, you are going to wish you had sent her to Mexico, because what I am going to do to you is going to make a lobotomy look like a mercy. I grabbed the car keys. Not the keys to the Rolls Royce, the keys to the old truck. It was time to go to work. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the tragedy of Bradley Worthington was about to begin. I pulled my rusted truck up to the service entrance of the estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the manicured lawn that I was supposed to have tended. The security guard checked my name on a clipboard and waved me through with a dismissive flick of his hand. I parked next to the dumpsters where the catering staff was unloading crates of champagne. I stepped out of the truck, clutching the bag of old clothes I had prepared. I walked into the kitchen. The air was thick with the smell of roasting lamb and expensive spices. The catering staff moved around me like a river around a stone, ignoring the old man in the work boots. Bradley was waiting for me by the pantry. He looked impeccable in a tuxedo that fit him perfectly. His broken nose was bandaged, a stark white strip across his face that ruined the image of perfection he was trying so hard to project. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a cruel satisfaction. He pointed to a pile of clothes on the floor. Put them on, he ordered. And hurry up. Mr. Anderson will be here any minute. I picked up the clothes. They were dirty. They smelled of mildew and oil. A gray jumpsuit that looked like something a mechanic would wear to change oil in a sewer. I stripped off my jacket and pants right there in the kitchen. I put on the jumpsuit. It was too tight in the shoulders and too short in the legs. I looked ridiculous. I looked like a clown. Perfect, Bradley said, looking me up and down. You look exactly like what you are. A failure. He grabbed a silver tray piled high with crystal glasses and shoved it into my hands. Stand in the corner of the grand salon, he commanded. Do not move unless someone asks for a drink, and remember, Luther, you are mute. If I hear one word from you, I make the call to the pilot. I nodded, keeping my head down. I walked out of the kitchen and into the grand salon. The room was transformed. Flowers everywhere, soft lighting, a string quartet playing in the corner. It was a setting for a fairy tale. But then I saw the nightmare. Zoe was standing by the fireplace. I almost dropped the tray. She wasn't wearing rags anymore. Bradley had dressed her up, but he hadn't dressed her like a wife. He hadn't dressed her like a human being. She was wearing a black maid uniform that was cut so high it barely covered her thighs. The neckline plunged deep, exposing her chest. It was a costume you would see in a cheap adult movie, not at a business gala. But that wasn't the worst part. Around her neck, tight against her throat, was a red leather collar. It had a silver buckle and a small metal tag that jingled when she moved. She was standing perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back. Her eyes were glazed over, staring at a spot on the wall 1,000 miles away. She was vibrating with a fine tremor that shook her entire body. The drugs. He had dosed her heavily to make sure she didn't fight back. I walked to my assigned corner, my heart breaking into splinters in my chest. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to rip that collar off her neck and wrap it around Bradley's throat. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to wait for the audience. I had to wait for the trap to spring. The guests began to arrive. They weren't the titans of industry Bradley hoped for. They were the bottom feeders, the nouveau riche, men who made their money in shady crypto schemes, and women who married them for the credit limits. They walked in loud and brash, their jewelry clanking, their voices echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Bradley greeted them at the door, playing the role of the charming host. He laughed at their jokes. He complimented their clothes. He steered them toward the bar. I stood in my corner, invisible. A man in a plaid suit snapped his fingers at me. "Wine," he barked. I walked over and held out the tray. He took a glass without looking at me. He didn't say thank you. To him, I was just a furniture item that dispensed alcohol. Then they saw Zoe. A hush fell over the group near the fireplace. A man with slicked back hair nudged his friend. "Look at that," he whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Is that the help?" His friend laughed. "That is some outfit. Bradley really knows how to pick them." They walked over to her. They circled her like sharks. Zoe didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stood there shivering in her humiliating costume. "Hey, sweetheart," the man said, leaning in close to her face. "You want to get me a drink?" Zoe didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was locked away. The man reached out and touched her arm. He ran his hand down her bare skin from her shoulder to her elbow. "She is soft," he leered. "Hey, Bradley, where did you find this one? Can I get one for my office?" Bradley walked over, beaming. "She is a rescue," he announced proudly. "A bit broken in the head, but she follows orders. That is the important thing, right, gentlemen? Obedience." The men laughed. They looked at Zoe, not as a woman, but as a toy, a curiosity. Then I saw Mrs. Worthington, Bradley's mother, entering the room. She was wearing a dress that looked like it was made of gold foil. She walked with a cane not because she needed it, but because she thought it made her look regal. She saw Zoe immediately. Her face twisted into a scowl. She marched over to the fireplace. The crowd parted for her. She stopped in front of Zoe and looked her up and down with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You look ridiculous," Mrs. Worthington spat. "Stand up straight, girl. You are embarrassing the family." Zoe flinched. The sound of the woman's voice seemed to penetrate the fog of the drugs. She looked down at her feet, trembling harder. "I am sorry," Mistress Zoe whispered. Mrs. Worthington lifted her glass of red wine. She swirled it, looking at the dark liquid. Then with a casual flick of her wrist, she threw the wine onto Zoe. The red liquid splashed across Zoe's chest, soaking into the white apron of her costume, staining her skin. It looked like blood. "Oops," Mrs. Worthington said, her voice dripping with fake surprise. My hand slipped. "Look what you made me do. You clumsy animal. You startled me." The guests gasped, but then they giggled. It was a game to them. A sport. "Clean it up," Mrs. Worthington ordered, pointing to the floor where some of the wine had splattered. "And clean yourself up. You look filthy." "Look." Zoe dropped to her knees. She didn't hesitate. The conditioning was too deep. She pulled a rag from her apron pocket and began to scrub the floor at Mrs. Worthington's feet. I gripped the silver tray so hard the metal began to bend under my fingers. My vision blurred with red rage. This was it. I couldn't watch this anymore. I was going to kill them all. I took a step forward. I was going to swing the heavy tray into Mrs. Worthington's face, and then I was going to take the cane and beat Bradley until he stopped moving. I took another step. Then I saw him. Standing in the shadows near the entrance to the kitchen was a man in a black chauffeur uniform. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and terrifyingly still. It was Jerome. He had infiltrated the staff just as we planned. He caught my eye. He saw the murder on my face. He slowly shook his head. Just once. A tiny, imperceptible movement. "Wait." His eyes shifted to the front door. I stopped. I forced myself to breathe. I forced my muscles to unlock. If I attacked now, I would just be the crazy old man who ruined the party. I would be arrested. Zoe would be sent to Mexico. I had to wait for the witness. I had to wait for the hammer. The doorbell rang. It was a deep, heavy chime that echoed through the house. Bradley froze. He looked at his watch. "He is here," he hissed to the room. Everyone shut up. Places, people. He ran a hand through his hair, checking his reflection in the mirror. He adjusted his tie. He looked like a man about to meet God. He rushed to the door. He threw it open. Standing on the porch was Arthur Anderson. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that whispered power. He didn't look like these other guests. He looked like a mountain range in a room full of molehills. Behind him stood 2 large security guards. Mr. Anderson Bradley gushed, bowing slightly. "Welcome. Welcome to my home. It is an honor, truly an honor." Arthur stepped into the foyer. He didn't smile. He didn't offer his hand. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the tacky guests, the loud decorations, and finally landing on the scene by the fireplace. He saw Zoe on her knees scrubbing the floor in her degrading costume. He saw Mrs. Worthington standing over her looking triumphant. And he saw me standing in the corner in my dirty jumpsuit holding a tray. His eyes met mine. For a second I saw a flash of recognition, a flash of shock. But he hid it instantly. He was a professional. "Mr. Worthington," Arthur said, his voice deep and gravelly. "You have an interesting way of entertaining." Bradley laughed nervously. "Oh, just keeping the staff busy, sir," Bradley said. "Please come in. Can I get you a drink? We have the finest scotch." Arthur walked into the room. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. They knew real money when they saw it. They could smell the billions. Bradley trotted beside him like a yapping dog. "I have prepared a presentation," Bradley said. "About the algorithm. I think you will find the projections very exciting." "I am not here for projections," Arthur said, cutting him off. "I am here for the atmosphere. You told me you run a disciplined house. I want to see it." He stopped in the middle of the room. He pointed a finger at Zoe. "Is that the girl you told me about?" Arthur asked. "The one from the asylum?" Bradley beamed. "Yes, sir. That is her. Zoe. My charity case." Arthur looked at her. "She is on her knees," Arthur observed. "She likes it there," Bradley said quickly. "It is her natural state. She knows her place, sir. She is very obedient." Arthur nodded slowly. "And the old man?" Arthur asked, pointing at me. "Oh, him." Bradley waved a hand in my direction. "That is just the gardener. He is mute. A bit simple. I keep him around to reach the high shelves." I stood stone still. I didn't blink. I was the prop. I was the furniture. Arthur looked at me. He looked at the dirty jumpsuit. He looked at the tray. "Well," Arthur said, "it seems you have everything under control, Mr. Worthington." "Absolutely," Sir Bradley said. "I believe in order. I believe in hierarchy. Some people are born to lead and some are born to serve. It is the natural order of things." "Is it?" Arthur asked. He turned back to Zoe. "Does she speak?" Arthur asked. Bradley laughed. "She speaks when she is spoken to, sir, but honestly she doesn't have much to say. Her mind is gone. She is more like a pet than a person, really." "A pet," Arthur repeated. His voice was neutral, unreadable. "Exactly," Bradley said. "A loyal pet. Watch." Bradley snapped his fingers. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Zoe," he barked. Zoe looked up. She stopped scrubbing. She looked at Bradley with those terrified, empty eyes. "Yes, master," she whispered. "Show Mr. Anderson how well trained you are," Bradley said. He looked at Arthur, a sick grin on his face. "She does tricks," he said. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what was coming. I had heard him planning it. He was going to make her perform. He was going to strip away the last shred of her dignity to impress a billionaire. I looked at Jerome again. He was tense, ready to spring. Not yet, I thought. Let him dig the hole a little deeper. Let him show the world exactly what he is. What kind of tricks, Arthur asked. Bradley reached into his pocket and pulled out a dog treat. "A dry biscuit," Zoe, Bradley said, holding up the treat. "Speak." Zoe stared at the biscuit. Confusion warred with conditioning on her face. "Speak," Bradley repeated, his voice hardening. "Or you go in the crate." Zoe trembled. She opened her mouth. I gripped the tray. The metal bit into my skin. "Bark," Bradley commanded. "Bark for the nice man, Zoe." Zoe looked at Arthur. She looked at the guests who were snickering. She looked at me. And then she opened her mouth and let out a sound. Woof. It was a broken, pathetic sound. A sound of total defeat. Bradley laughed. He tossed the biscuit at her. It hit her in the chest and fell to the floor. "Good girl," he said. That was it. The line was crossed. The dam broke. I didn't wait for a signal. I didn't wait for Jerome. I lifted the silver tray high above my head. And I threw it. I threw it with every ounce of rage I had stored up for 20 years. I threw it with the strength of a father watching his child be destroyed. The tray sailed through the air spinning like a discus. It slammed into the marble floor right between Bradley and Arthur. Clang! The sound was like a bomb going off. It vibrated the windows. It silenced the room instantly. The music stopped. The laughter died. Bradley jumped back terrified. He spun around. I stepped out of the corner. I walked into the center of the room. My boots thudded heavy on the floor. I wasn't hunched over anymore. I was standing at my full height, 6'3" of angry steel. Bradley stared at me, his mouth open. "What the hell are you doing?" he screamed. "You stupid old man. You dropped the tray." I didn't look at him. I looked at Zoe. She was cowering on the floor, staring at the silver tray vibrating on the stones. "Pick it up," Bradley shrieked at me. "Pick it up and get out. You are fired. Do you hear me? Fired." I reached up to the collar of my dirty jumpsuit. I grabbed the fabric in both hands. "I am not fired, Bradley," I said. My voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was deep, resonant, the voice that used to command boardrooms. I ripped the jumpsuit open. The snaps popped like gunfire. I shrugged the dirty fabric off my shoulders, letting it fall to the floor in a pile of rags. Underneath, I was wearing the navy blue Tom Ford suit, the silk tie, the gold cufflinks glinting in the light. I straightened my cuffs. I adjusted my jacket. I looked Bradley in the eye. "And I quit," I said. Bradley stood in the center of the room, basking in the attention of the room like a lizard on a warm rock. He gestured toward Zoe with a hand that held a crystal glass of scotch. To him, she was not a human being anymore. She was a conversation piece. She was an anecdote. He looked at Arthur Anderson, expecting approval, expecting the billionaire to be impressed by his total dominance over his household. "This, gentleman, is the reality of charity," Bradley announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room where I stood in the shadows. "This is Zoe. She is the crazy servant I told you about. I keep her around out of pity mostly. The state would just lock her in a cage and throw away the key. But here she has a purpose. She cleans, she scrubs, she serves. It gives her small broken life meaning." The guests murmured in agreement. They nodded, sipping their wine, looking at my daughter with a mixture of revulsion and fascination. They saw the collar around her neck. They saw the skimpy outfit that exposed her bruises. But because Bradley was rich and the champagne was expensive, they convinced themselves this was normal. They convinced themselves that this was just how the elite handled their problems. "She looks completely gone," one of the investors whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Look at her eyes. There is nobody home." Bradley laughed. "Oh, she is in there somewhere, buried deep under the madness. But you have to be firm with her. You have to treat her like what she is, an animal that needs a master. If you give her an inch, she gets violent. If you show her kindness, she bites. So we keep a tight leash, literally." He tugged on the red leather collar around her neck. Zoe stumbled forward, her knees scraping against the marble floor. She didn't cry out. She just lowered her head further, staring at Bradley's polished shoes, the same shoes that had wiped mud on her back just yesterday. Arthur Anderson stood motionless. His face was a mask of granite. He didn't look at Bradley. He looked at Zoe. I could see the muscles in his jaw working. I knew Arthur. I knew he was a man of old codes. He believed in strength, but he despised cruelty. What he was seeing right now was testing every ounce of his self-control. He wanted to reach out and throttle Bradley. I could see it in his hands, which were clenched into fists at his sides. But he held his position. He was waiting for my signal. He was playing the role I had asked him to play. "Does she listen?" Arthur asked, his voice deep and devoid of emotion. It was the cue. It was the question that would give Bradley the rope to hang himself. Bradley beamed. He thought Arthur was intrigued. He thought he was bonding with a fellow powerful man over the subjugation of the weak. "Does she listen?" Bradley repeated with a chuckle. "Mr. Anderson, she does not just listen. She obeys. That is the beauty of it. When you break a horse, you get a ride. When you break a person, you get a servant who never talks back. She would jump off the roof if I told her it would clean the gutters." "Show me," Arthur said. The room went deadly silent. The string quartet in the corner stopped playing, sensing the tension. Every eye was fixed on the center of the room, on the man in the tuxedo and the woman on her knees. Bradley looked around the room, soaking up the anticipation. He loved this. He loved being the ringmaster of his own sick circus. "You want a demonstration?" Bradley asked. "I want to see if your control is as absolute as you claim," Arthur said. Bradley smiled. It was a wet, ugly smile. He reached into his pocket. I thought he was going to pull out the dog treat again, but he didn't. He just pointed a finger at the floor. "Zoe," he said, his voice dropping an octave, trying to sound commanding. Zoe flinched. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terror so profound it looked like madness. She was vibrating. The drugs were fighting with the adrenaline in her system. "Yes, master," she whispered. Bradley looked at Arthur. "She thinks she is a dog sometimes," Bradley said casually. "When the psychosis gets bad, she forgets she is human. So we play along. It calms her down." He looked back at Zoe. "Zoe, who is a good girl?" he asked. "I am," Zoe whispered. "I am a good girl." Bradley patted her head. "That is right. And what do good girls do when they meet important guests?" Zoe looked confused. She looked around the room, searching for an answer in the faces of the strangers who were mocking her. She looked at me, standing in the corner in my dirty jumpsuit. Her eyes lingered on me for a second. There was a spark, a tiny flicker of memory. But then Bradley snapped his fingers and the spark vanished. "They greet them," Bradley said. "But you cannot speak English, can you, Zoe? You are a dog, and dogs do not talk." He leaned in close to her face. "So bark," he commanded. The word hung in the air. "Bark!" The guests giggled. A woman in a red dress covered her mouth to hide a smile. They thought it was funny. They thought it was a parlor trick. "Bark for Mr. Anderson," Bradley said, his voice hardening. "Show him how well trained you are." Zoe trembled. Tears began to spill from her eyes, tracking through the makeup Bradley had forced her to wear. She shook her head slightly, a tiny rebellion. "Please," she whispered. "Please, master." "Do not beg," Bradley hissed. "Obey. Bark, Zoe. Bark like the bitch you are. Or do you want to go back in the box?" The box. My blood ran cold. He had a box. He locked her in a box. Zoe's breathing hitched. She was hyperventilating. The fear of the box, whatever it was, outweighed her shame. It outweighed her humanity. She looked at Arthur Anderson. She looked at his shoes. She opened her mouth. Her jaw trembled. She tried to make the sound. She tried to force herself to do the one thing that would strip away the last shred of her dignity. "Woof," she stammered. It was a broken sound, a sound of total defeat. It wasn't a bark. It was a cry for help strangled in her throat. Bradley frowned. "That was pathetic," he said. "Louder. I want to hear a real bark. Like a guard dog. Do it again." He raised his hand as if to strike her. Zoe flinched, closing her eyes, bracing for the blow. "Woof!" she cried out, louder this time, a sob breaking through the sound. "Woof!" The room erupted in laughter. The guests clapped. "Bravo," one man shouted, raising his glass. "That is obedience." Bradley laughed with them. He looked at Arthur, expecting validation. "See," he said. Total control. That was it. The dam broke. The wall I had built around my heart to keep my anger in check shattered into a million pieces. I looked at my daughter on her knees, forced to act like an animal for the amusement of these parasites. I looked at the man who had stolen her life, her mind, and her dignity. I didn't think about the plan anymore. I didn't think about the police or the FBI or the timeline. I only thought about ending him. My hands were gripping the heavy silver tray so hard the metal edges were digging into my palms, cutting the skin. I felt the warm trickle of blood. I took a step forward. My work boots hit the floor with a heavy thud. I took another step. Then I let out a roar. It wasn't a word. It was a primal sound of rage that had been building for 20 years. I lifted the silver tray high above my head. It was heavy, loaded with crystal glasses and expensive wine. I didn't care. I hurled it. I threw it with the force of a freight train. I threw it directly at the floor between Bradley and Zoe. Smash! The sound was apocalyptic. The silver tray hit the marble floor with the force of a bomb. Crystal shattered. Wine exploded outward like a blood spatter, spraying across Bradley's tuxedo and the guests' expensive gowns. The tray clattered and spun, the metal screeching against the stone. The room went instantly silent. The laughter died in their throats. Bradley jumped back, slipping on the wine and almost falling. He looked around wild-eyed, trying to find the source of the attack. "What the hell?" he screamed. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked into the center of the room. I wasn't hunched over anymore. I wasn't the old gardener with the bad back. I stood at my full height, 6 feet 3 inches of muscle and fury. I walked with the heavy, confident stride of a man who owns the ground he walks on. I walked straight to Zoe. She was cowering on the floor, covering her head, waiting for the punishment she thought was coming. I stopped between her and Bradley. I turned my back to her, shielding her from him, shielding her from the room. I became a wall between my daughter and the world that wanted to hurt her. I looked at Bradley. He stared at me, his eyes bulging. He didn't understand what he was seeing. He saw the dirty jumpsuit. He saw the old man, but he also saw the look in my eyes, a look that promised violence. "You stupid old fool," Bradley shrieked, his voice cracking. "You dropped the tray. You ruined the carpet. Look what you did." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Get out," he screamed. "You are fired. Get out of my house before I have you arrested." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him. "I said get out," Bradley yelled, taking a step toward me, raising his hand to push me. I caught his wrist. I didn't just grab it. I clamped onto it like a vice. I squeezed. I felt the bones in his wrist grind together. Bradley gasped. He tried to pull away, but he couldn't. He looked at my hand. He looked at my face. And for the first time, he saw me. He really saw me. "Let go of me," he whispered, pain and fear creeping into his voice. "What are you doing?" I leaned in close. I smelled his fear. It smelled better than the expensive wine. "I am not the one who is leaving, Bradley," I said. My voice wasn't the raspy whisper of the gardener anymore. It was deep, resonant, and cold as the grave. I released his wrist with a shove that sent him stumbling backward. Bradley rubbed his wrist, staring at me in horror. "Who do you think you are?" he sputtered, trying to regain his composure in front of his guests. "You are just a servant, a crazy old man." "Do you want to die, Bradley?" I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I didn't shout it. I said it with the calm curiosity of a man asking about the weather. Bradley froze. "Excuse me," he stammered. I took a step toward him. He took a step back. "You asked my daughter to bark," I said. "You wiped your shoes on her back. You put a collar on her neck." I took another step. "You think you are a master," I said. "You think you have power because you have a tuxedo and a house you didn't pay for." I reached up to the collar of my greasy jumpsuit. I grabbed the fabric in both fists. "But you forgot the first rule of power, Bradley." I ripped the jumpsuit open. The snaps popped loudly, one by one, echoing in the silent room. "Real power does not need to shout." I shrugged the dirty coveralls off my shoulders. They fell to the floor in a heap, revealing the navy blue bespoke suit underneath. The silk tie, the gold cufflinks, the crisp white shirt that cost more than his entire outfit. I straightened my cuffs. I adjusted my jacket. I looked like a titan. I looked like the man who had built an empire. Bradley stared. His mouth hung open. The guests stared. Arthur Anderson smiled a small, cold smile. "Who are you?" Bradley whispered. "I am the man who owns your debt," I said. "I am the man who owns this house. And I am the father of the woman you just tried to break." I pointed a finger at him. "Run, Bradley. Run. Because the gardener just retired. And the executioner is here." Bradley stared at me, his eyes darting from my face to the pile of dirty rags on the floor and back up to the silk lapels of my navy blue suit. He blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination. The room was deadly silent, the kind of silence that happens when a bomb fails to detonate and everyone is waiting for the tick. I adjusted my cuffs. The diamonds in my cufflinks caught the light of the chandelier, sending sharp prisms dancing across the ceiling. They were vintage Cartier, a gift from the board of directors when I retired 5 years ago. They cost more than the car Bradley drove. He let out a laugh. It was a sharp, brittle sound like glass breaking. He looked around at his guests, searching for someone to share the joke with. "Look at him," Bradley crowed, pointing a shaking finger at my chest. "Look at the old fool. He must have stolen it." He took a step toward me, his face twisting into a mask of ugly amusement. "Where did you get that suit, Luther? Did you break into my closet? Did you steal it from the dry cleaners? You look ridiculous, like a monkey dressed up for the circus. Take it off before you rip the seams. You are stretching it out." The racism was casual, easy for him. He didn't see a man in a bespoke suit. He saw a prop that had malfunctioned. He saw a black man stepping out of his lane. I didn't speak. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there, letting his insults wash over me like rain on a stone. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief. I dabbed a speck of dirt from my lapel, the only remnant of the costume I had just shed. Bradley turned to the room, his arms wide, inviting them to join in his mockery. "I apologize, everyone," he announced, his voice trembling with manic energy. "My father-in-law has delusions of grandeur. It is part of the dementia. He likes to play dress-up. I usually keep the closets locked." He turned to the security guards who were standing by the door, confused and unsure of what to do. "Get him out of here," Bradley barked. "Strip him out of my clothes and throw him in the street." The guards took a step forward, but they didn't get far. Jerome stepped out from the shadows. He wasn't the chauffeur anymore. He had shed his cap and jacket, revealing a holster under his arm and a badge on his belt. He held up a hand, palm out. "Stay back," Jerome ordered. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The guards froze. They looked at Jerome. They looked at me. They saw the suit. They saw the posture. And they realized something Bradley was too blind to see. You do not touch a man who wears a suit like that, not unless you want to lose your job or your life. Bradley turned back to Arthur Anderson. He looked desperate now. He needed to regain control. He needed the billionaire to be on his side. "Mr. Anderson, please forgive this interruption," Bradley stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It is hard to get good help these days, especially when you take in family charity cases. The old man is sick. He doesn't know what he is doing. We will get this cleaned up and get back to business." He reached out to touch Arthur's arm, a gesture of false intimacy. Arthur didn't move away. He simply looked at Bradley's hand until Bradley pulled it back as if he had touched a hot stove. Arthur's face was unreadable, a mask of granite. He slowly turned his head and looked at me. He looked me up and down, taking in the suit, the shoes, the stance. Then Arthur Anderson, the billionaire shipping magnate, the man Bradley had spent weeks trying to impress, did something that made the entire room gasp. He walked past Bradley. He walked right past him as if he were a ghost. He walked across the marble floor, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He stopped 3 feet in front of me, and he bowed. It wasn't a nod. It wasn't a polite inclination of the head. It was a deep, formal bow from the waist, a bow of profound respect, a bow you give to a king or a conqueror. He held the bow for a long second. Then he straightened up and looked me in the eye. "Chairman Banks Arthur," said, his voice ringing clear in the silent room. "It is good to see you again, sir. You are looking well." The air left the room. Bradley made a noise like a dying engine, a strangled, choking sound. "Chairman," he whispered. He looked at Arthur. He looked at me. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile the image of the mute gardener with the man being honored by a billionaire. Mr. Anderson Bradley stuttered, his voice high and thin. "You are mistaken. That is Luther. He is my father-in-law. He is a gardener. He planted the hydrangeas. He is nobody." Arthur turned slowly to face Bradley. The look of disgust on his face was absolute. "Nobody," Arthur repeated. "You think Luther Banks is nobody." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Young man, this nobody owns half the logistics infrastructure in the tri-state area. He brokered the peace treaty of '98. He built an empire with his bare hands while you were still learning to tie your shoes." Bradley shook his head frantically. No, that is impossible. He lives in a shack. He drives a rusted truck. He asks me for money." I stepped forward then. I closed the distance between us. Bradley shrank back. "I live in a shack because I chose a simple life," I said, my voice deep and smooth. "I drive a truck because I like it, and I asked you for money, Bradley, to see if you had a soul." I looked down at him. "You failed the test." Jerome walked into the center of the room. He was holding a remote control. He pointed it at the large projection screen that had been set up for Bradley's pitch deck. "Allow me," Jerome said. He clicked the button. The screen flickered to life, but it didn't show the logo for Worthington Tech. It showed a dossier, a black background with white text, crisp and professional. At the top was my photo. Not the old man in the garden, but a headshot from Forbes magazine taken 5 years ago. I was wearing a suit similar to the one I wore now, staring into the camera with eyes of steel. Underneath the photo, it read, "Luther Banks, founder and CEO Emeritus Banks Logistics Group." Below that, in bold numbers, was a figure that made the guests gasp audibly. Net worth $80 million. Bradley stared at the screen. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair to hold himself up. 80 million, he wheezed. Jerome clicked the remote again. The screen changed. Now it showed a series of legal documents, loan agreements, promissory notes, and at the bottom of each one was Bradley's signature. And this, Jerome announced, his voice taking on the cadence of a prosecutor, is the financial portfolio of Worthington Tech. A list of debts scrolled up the screen. 2 million to the Vegas Consortium, 500,000 in business loans, 300,000 in credit card debt. The company is insolvent, Jerome said. It has no assets, no revenue. It is a corpse walking. Jerome clicked the button one last time. A new document appeared. It was a transfer of ownership agreement dated this morning at 9 a.m. However, Jerome continued, the debt has been purchased. The Vegas Consortium was happy to sell the note for a cash settlement. He pointed at the screen. The sole creditor of Worthington Tech. The owner of every cent of debt Bradley Worthington owes. The name flashed on the screen in red letters. Luther Banks. I watched Bradley read the name. I watched the realization crash into him like a tidal wave. He wasn't pitching an investor. He wasn't securing funding. He was standing in front of the man who owned him. I walked up to him. I stood so close I could smell the fear sweating out of his pores. I bought it all, Bradley, I said softly. I bought your debt. I bought your mortgage. I bought your car notes. I gestured to the room. I own this house. I own the chair you are leaning on. I own the tuxedo on your back. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he and Zoe could hear. And I own your life. Bradley looked at me. His eyes were wide and wet. He looked like a child who had woken up in a nightmare. But why, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know who you were, I said. I wanted to know if you loved my daughter or if you were just a parasite. I looked over at Zoe. She was still on the floor staring at me. The fog in her eyes was lifting, replaced by shock. She looked at the screen. She looked at me. Daddy, she whispered. I looked back at Bradley. You wiped your shoes on my daughter, I said. You called her a servant. You tried to cut out her brain to steal a trust fund you thought you could control. I grabbed his lapels and pulled him close. You thought I was a gardener, Bradley. But I am the one who pulls the weeds, and you are a weed. I shoved him backward. He tripped over his own feet and fell hard onto the marble floor, landing right where he had forced Zoe to kneel. He looked up at me. He looked at Arthur Anderson, who was watching with cold satisfaction. He looked at his guests who were backing away, terrified of the association, and he knew it was over. The game was finished. The house of cards had fallen, and he was buried under the rubble. Jerome stepped forward, handing me a thick folder. The eviction notice, Sir Jerome said, and the foreclosure documents. I took the folder. I dropped it on Bradley's chest. You have 0 days to vacate, I said. Get out of my house. Bradley looked at the eviction notice on his chest, and then he looked up at me. The reality of his situation finally pierced through his narcissism. He realized that the man standing above him was not a senile gardener, but a titan who had just bought the ground beneath his feet. His arrogance evaporated instantly, leaving behind a slimy, pathetic cowardice. He scrambled to his knees, his expensive tuxedo pants sliding on the wine-stained marble. He reached out and grabbed the leg of my trousers, clutching the fabric of my bespoke suit with desperate, blood-stained hands. Dad, he stammered, his voice pitching up into a whine. Dad, please. You do not understand. It was a joke. It was all just a show. He looked around the room, wild-eyed, searching for an audience that would believe him. The guests were silent, watching him with mixture of horror and morbid fascination. I was just trying to impress Mr. Anderson, Bradley babbled, tears mixing with the blood on his face. You know how it is in business, Dad. You have to put on a show. You have to be tough. I did not mean any of it. I love Zoe. I worship the ground she walks on. He crawled toward Zoe, who was still kneeling on the floor, her hands covering her ears, trying to block out the noise. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward him. She flinched, terrified, but she didn't fight. The conditioning was too deep. Tell him, Zoe, Bradley pleaded, shaking her. Tell your father how happy we are. Tell him about our life. Tell him I love you. Zoe looked at him, her eyes wide and confused. She looked at me. She looked at the guests. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She was trapped in the nightmare he had built for her, unable to distinguish the truth from the lies he had fed her for years. Say it, Bradley hissed. digging his fingers into her arm. "Say I love you." I did not wait for her to answer. I stepped forward and drove the toe of my Italian leather shoe into Bradley's ribs. It wasn't a kick meant to break bones, although I certainly hoped it did. It was a kick meant to remove a parasite. "Get your hands off my daughter," I growled. Bradley yelped and rolled away, clutching his side. I reached down and gently pulled Zoe to her feet. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. I pulled her behind me again, shielding her from the monster on the floor. "Jerome," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Show them the truth." Jerome nodded. He pressed a button on the remote control. The projection screen which had displayed Bradley's deaths flickered and changed. The video feed from the birdhouse camera appeared. The room gasped. On the screen was the footage from 2 years ago, the rainy night. The image was grainy but clear enough. Everyone in the room saw Bradley drunk and raging on the porch. They saw him punch Zoe in the head. They saw her fall. And then they saw him kick her in the stomach over and over again while she screamed for mercy. The audio boomed through the speakers, filling the grand salon with the sounds of violence, the thud of the kicks, the wet crunch of impact, Bradley's voice screaming that she was useless. Bradley stared at the screen, his face draining of color. "That is fake!" he shrieked. "That is CGI!" He made it up. Jerome clicked the button again. The screen changed. Now it was playing an audio waveform. It was the recording from Dr. Eric's office. "I want her compliant." Bradley's voice rang out clear and undeniable. "I want to induce a state of permanent dementia." Then Dr. Eric's voice. "It causes rapid neurodegeneration. You are melting her brain." Then Bradley again. "Good. If she is a vegetable, she cannot testify." The guests recoiled. Some of them covered their mouths. This wasn't just abuse. This was a horror movie. This was a man calculating the destruction of his wife's mind for profit. Jerome clicked the button a third time. Documents appeared. The forged signatures on the bank transfers. The fake medical records claiming a miscarriage that never happened. The flight itinerary for the clinic in Mexico booked for next Tuesday. It was a mountain of evidence. It was undeniable proof of a conspiracy so vile it made the room feel cold. Bradley was shaking his head back and forth, muttering "no, no, no" over and over again. But I wasn't done. I snapped my fingers. From the hallway, the back doors swung open. 2 of my security team members walked in. They were escorting 2 men in handcuffs. The first was Dr. Eric. He looked like a ghost, pale and sweating, shaking from withdrawal. He wouldn't look at anyone. The second was Sheriff Miller. The corrupt lawman who had threatened to arrest me just yesterday was now wearing zip ties, his badge ripped from his chest, his head hung low in defeat. Bradley looked at them and let out a sound like a wounded animal. His allies, his protection. They were captured. "Sheriff Miller," I said, addressing the room, "would you like to tell these good people why you ignored the domestic abuse calls from this house? Or should I play the recording of the wire transfer Bradley sent to your offshore account last month?" Miller didn't speak. He just stared at the floor, shame burning his ears. "And Dr. Eric," I continued, "tell us about the lobotomy. Tell us about the procedure Bradley paid you to arrange." Eric sobbed. "He wanted her frontal lobe severed. He wanted her docile." The guests began to shout. Someone called Bradley a monster. Someone else threw a wine glass at him. It shattered near his head, but he didn't move. He was paralyzed by the weight of his own sins. Suddenly, I saw movement near the back of the room. Mr. and Mrs. Worthington Bradley's parents were trying to inch toward the French doors that led to the garden. They looked terrified. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal instinct of rats fleeing a sinking ship. "Going somewhere," I called out. Mrs. Worthington froze. She turned around, trying to muster a shred of her old haughtiness. "This has nothing to do with us," she said, her voice shrill. "We did not know. We are victims too." "Victims," I repeated. "You kicked my daughter in the face yesterday. You told your son to kill her because she was an embarrassment." I gestured to the screen where the transcript of her conversation with Bradley was now displayed. "Why do you not just kill her?" The text read in bold letters. Mrs. Worthington turned pale. "That is taken out of context," she stammered. "We are leaving. You cannot stop us. We have rights." She grabbed her husband's arm and turned for the door. "I wouldn't go out there if I were you," I said calmly. "Why not?" she snapped. "Because the Federal Bureau of Investigation is currently in your driveway," I said, "and they are very interested in the contents of your trunk." Mrs. Worthington stopped. What are you talking about? My team did a little sweep of your vehicle while you were enjoying the party, I said. It seems they found 2 kilograms of high-grade cocaine hidden in the spare tire well. Her eyes bulged. That is a lie, she screamed. We do not do drugs. I shrugged. Constructive possession is a tricky thing, Mrs. Worthington. It is your car. It is in your trunk. And considering your son's connections to the criminal underworld, I think the feds are going to have a lot of questions about your family business. It was a frame job, of course. Or maybe it wasn't. Jerome was resourceful. But whether the drugs were really theirs or a gift from the Tooth Fairy didn't matter. What mattered was that it gave the FBI probable cause to hold them until the murder conspiracy charges stuck. As if on cue, the sound of heavy boots hit the porch. The French doors burst open. FBI. Nobody move. A dozen agents in tactical gear swarmed the room. They weren't the local cops. These were federal agents wearing windbreakers with yellow letters. They moved with precision. They grabbed Bradley, hauling him up from the floor. They grabbed his parents, who were screaming about lawyers and rights. They grabbed the sheriff and the doctor. The room was a chaos of shouting and flashing lights. The guests were cowering against the walls, trying to look invisible. I stood in the center of the storm, holding Zoe's hand. She was trembling, but she was watching. She was watching the man who had terrorized her being manhandled like a common criminal. The agents cuffed Bradley's hands behind his back. They dragged him toward the door. As he passed me, he looked up. His face was a mask of snot and blood and tears. Why, he croaked. Why did you do this? I leaned in close. I whispered in his ear so only he could hear. You wiped your shoes on my daughter Bradley. You made her scrub your floors. I smiled, a cold, hard smile. In federal prison, you are going to be the new girl. You are going to scrub the floors. You are going to clean the toilets. And you are going to do it for the rest of your natural life. I patted his cheek. You wanted a servant, Bradley. Now you are one. The agents dragged him away. He was screaming, but nobody was listening. His reign of terror was over. The king was dead. I turned to Zoe. She was looking at the door where he had vanished. Then she looked at me. Daddy? She whispered. I wrapped my arms around her. I am here, baby, I said. I am here. And he is never coming back. The silence after the FBI left was not peaceful. It was the heavy silence of a battlefield after the shooting stops. Zoe was standing in the middle of the grand salon, still wearing the degrading costume, still trembling. The adrenaline that had kept her upright began to fade, replaced by the crushing reality of withdrawal. Her body, dependent on the toxic cocktail Dr. Eric had fed her for years, began to revolt. She collapsed. I caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was burning hot, but she was shivering as if she were freezing. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Daddy, she whimpered. The bugs are under my skin. Get them out. She clawed at her arms, leaving red welts on her skin. I picked her up. She felt light, too light, like a bird with hollow bones. I carried her out of that house of horrors, past the stunned guests, past the broken door, past the flashing lights of the police cars. Jerome had the Rolls-Royce waiting. I laid her in the back seat, covering her with my suit jacket, trying to give her back a shred of the dignity Bradley had stolen. The first week was hell. I didn't take her to a local hospital. I couldn't risk the paparazzi or the lingering influence of Bradley's network. I flew her to my private island in the Caribbean, a sanctuary I had bought years ago and never used. I flew in the best addiction specialists from Switzerland and neurologists from Johns Hopkins. Zoe screamed for 3 days. She hallucinated. She saw Bradley in the corners of the room holding the belt. She begged for forgiveness for sins she never committed. She cried out for the baby she thought she had killed. I sat by her bed every minute. I held her hand while she thrashed. I wiped the sweat from her forehead. I sang her the lullabies I used to sing when she was a little girl trying to reach the daughter buried under the trauma. It is okay, baby girl, I whispered 1,000 times. You are safe. The monster is gone. You did not kill anyone. You are not crazy. You are sick, but you are going to get better. On the 4th day, the fever broke. She opened her eyes and they were clear. Weak, but clear. She looked at me, and for the first time in years she saw me. Not the gardener, not the stranger, but her father. Dad, she croaked, her voice raspy from screaming. Where are we? We are home, I said, tears streaming down my face. We are free. The physical recovery was fast, but the mental healing was a slow, painful climb. We spent months on the island. We walked on the beach. We talked. We cried. We unpacked the years of gaslighting and abuse. I told her the truth about the baby, about her injuries, about the trust fund. It was hard for her to accept that her entire reality had been a lie constructed by a man she loved. But with every truth, she grew stronger. She started to eat. She started to smile. The hollow look in her eyes was replaced by a spark of the fierce intelligence she used to have. While we healed, the world outside was dealing with Bradley. The trial was swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming. The video footage, the audio recordings, the financial records, the testimony of his co-conspirators who all flipped on him to save themselves. It was a slam dunk. Jerome brought me the updates. Bradley's parents were indicted on federal drug trafficking charges thanks to the cocaine in their trunk and a very aggressive prosecutor who didn't like their attitude. Dr. Eric lost his license and was facing 10 years for medical malpractice and assault. Sheriff Miller was looking at 15 for corruption and obstruction of justice. But Bradley got the worst of it. The jury didn't just see a fraudster, they see a monster. They saw the video of him kicking his wife. They heard him planning to lobotomize her. They convicted him on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault, wire fraud, and human trafficking. The judge, a woman with a reputation for harsh sentences, gave him 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. And prison justice is a poetic thing. Jerome showed me a report from a contact inside the penitentiary. Bradley wasn't popular. The other inmates didn't like men who beat women. They didn't like men who thought they were better than everyone else. Bradley had been assigned to the cleaning crew. He spent his days scrubbing toilets and mopping floors, and rumor had it the other prisoners made him wipe their shoes every day. He was living the life he had forced on Zoe. He was the servant now, 1 year later. I sat on the terrace of my island villa watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of gold and violet. I was wearing a linen suit, relaxed and comfortable. I wasn't the gardener anymore. I was just Luther. Zoe walked out onto the terrace, carrying a tray of iced tea. She looked radiant. Her hair was grown out thick and healthy. Her skin glowed. She was wearing a white sundress that flowed around her like a cloud. She put the tray down and sat next to me. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. She had taken over the bank's foundation and turned it into a powerhouse for victims of domestic abuse. She was using her trust fund to build shelters to fund legal aid for women trapped in coercive control situations. She was turning her pain into power. "Here you go, Dad," she said, handing me a glass. "Thank you, sweetheart." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the waves. It was a peaceful silence, a silence born of safety and love. "You know, Dad," she said, looking out at the water, "for a long time I thought that was my life. I thought I was born to be on my knees. I thought I was broken." "You were never broken," I said. "You were just bent, and steel bends, but it does not break." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I used to think I was a servant," she said softly. "I thought my purpose was to clean up other people's messes, to be small, to be invisible." She turned to me and took my hand. Her grip was strong. "But you reminded me of something, Dad. You reminded me that I am a Banks, and we do not serve monsters. We slay them." I squeezed her hand. "That is right, baby girl," I said. "You are not a servant. You are a queen, and don't you ever let anyone forget it." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I won't," she whispered. "Thanks to you, I know exactly who I am." We watched the sun disappear into the sea, two survivors who had walked through hell and come out the other side, not burned, but refined. The nightmare was over. The morning had come, and the future was wide open, and it belonged to us. This story stands as a testament that true power does not reside in the volume of your voice or the price tag of your suit, but in the quiet strength of your character. Bradley mistook silence for weakness and humility for poverty, a fatal error that cost him everything. We learned that dignity is an inherent right, not a privilege granted by others. No matter how deep the trauma or how convincing the lies, the truth remains: no human being was born to be a servant to another's cruelty. We are all royalty in our own right, waiting to reclaim our crowns. If you believe that justice was served today, and that every monster deserves to meet their match, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of retribution.